A massive explosion of energy strikes a remote location. Someone observes the huge crater with a glowing sword at its center. Then a voice speaks, asking something to Leon. The young man seems very tense about something, and the voice continues, saying, "Do you believe you are worthy?" He watches attentively and worriedly, then thinks that for him, who always gave in to the irrational voice of fate, he extends his hand, which begins to interact with that energy, and thinks that this sacred sword appeared and said those words. Then the sword continues, saying that opportunities must be granted fairly as the man grips the sword firmly. With an even more intense surge of energy, the object asks Leon if it is not right. As Liam is overwhelmed by the energy, he struggles through the process. A beautiful castle appears on a bright and lovely day while someone thinks about this world. Two training swords clash forcefully. While two young men exert themselves in battle, that same person thinks it's an extremely irrational world. As that blonde-haired person lands a strike and disarms his opponent, his wooden sword flies through the air and sticks into the ground nearby. Lying on the ground, Leon clutches his injured hand and says, "Damn it, take this seriously. Are you saying it's not even worth fighting me?" The other guy replies, saying of course not, and that there's not a single person in the Royal Academy who would fight him if it weren't for Leon. Quite irritated, the boy says that's because he keeps messing around with them, just like he did now, and the guy says he was holding back, but compared to before, Leon has improved. Leon is slightly annoyed by that information. Then he gets up and picks up his sword again. Attacking as if his life depended on it, he says that this condescending attitude is what he hates about him. Defending against the blows without any concern, someone says that Leon is amazing, and that the other Leon is no match for him, and that everyone was defeated in one strike. Someone asks if it's because they have the same name. Well, it's clear that our hero is struggling in that situation. Another says that although Leon is more handsome, both have the same spelling for their names. As a sword flies away, seemingly trying to reach the sun, someone says he lost again. Standing in the shade of a small wall, Leon rests from the fight. Catching his breath, he thinks it's been 3 years since Leon transferred there, and no matter how much he trains, he still can't surpass him. He thinks that even though they have the same name spelling, that boy is different from him in every way. His looks and personality came straight out of a fairy tale protagonist. He believes the story that he's a commoner must be a lie, and that he should have gone to the noble class, wondering if it's that fun to keep getting in his way. Suddenly, the blonde Leon shows up, extending his hand and asking if he's okay. And he just stands there smiling while Leon thinks that if only he were at least a jerk. Sighing, knowing there's nothing else to do, he takes the hand of the smiling boy. Meanwhile, someone calls out to Leon. Our hero looks on, slightly bothered. A person wearing high heels approaches, and slapping the boy's hand away, Leon tells him to back off. The blonde boy looks a bit confused, while the girl tells Leon to wait. Annoyed, she says she heard everything and that he picked a fight with Leon again. She asks why he keeps fighting him if he knows he'll lose. The blonde Leon, a bit tense, tries to say something, calling the girl Chloe, but she interrupts, noticing something. She grabs the boy's hand and asks if it's bleeding, saying she's going to take care of it and telling him to let her see. Pulling his hand back, our boy says it's fine, while she insists that they need to disinfect it first. Very irritated, he says it's none of her business and tells her not to worry about him. That leaves the girl a little surprised. Then the boy turns around and begins walking away, leaving the other two in silence. Sometime later, night begins to fall upon that vast academy. Nearby, the sound of blows can be heard. As night fully settles in, Leon is still there, beating on that tree trunk. Frustrated, he strikes it while thinking that if only he were blonde or at least had some kind of family support. Or if he at least had a master on the same level as that guy or noble blood, he wonders if anything would have been different. Landing a strong hit, his training sword snaps. He stands there, irritated, staring at what just happened, thinking that in the end, all he has is effort. What? In that irrational world, there are many barriers that can't be overcome with effort alone. He reflects for a moment and realizes today is Leon's birthday, and that they must be throwing a grand party for the pride of the Royal Academy. He throws the remains of his sword aside, and collapsing under a tree, he wonders whether he should give it his all until tomorrow. He thinks he already spent 3 years of his life there, so it would just be one more day. Rolling onto his side, he holds his head, and deeply upset, he begins to cry, wondering why he even has to give up. And if everything is decided from the start, then what's the point of effort? He then sits beneath that massive moon and says, "Oh goddess." Shouting, he asks what the meaning is behind his effort and his life, and he just sits there, staring at the shining moon in the silence of the night. Embarrassed, he thinks there's no way she's going to answer. But not far off, a massive glow appears in the sky. Something enormous and very bright, almost like a meteor, appears. Elsewhere, someone asks about Leon, and the blonde one says he hasn't seen him. Chloe, a bit annoyed, says no one in the dorms saw him either, till she thought he had gone to the party. Thoughtfully, she wonders where he could have gone, and the blonde Leon says she's thinking about him again. Completely ignoring the boy, she grabs her skirts and says she's going to look for him now. An older man remarks that it seems Her Highness was rejected, and the boy tells Gilbert not to call them that even if they're alone. He explains that if someone had heard that, there would have been no point in hiding his identity, and besides, he doesn't have the right to that title. Smiling, the man says that someone of royal blood is destined to shine even brighter in their trials, and he congratulates him on his 17th birthday. Just 1 year remains until the royal family's prophecy is fulfilled. He says that on the day, a member of the Clyde Empire's royal family comes of age. The life of the overseer who supports the current emperor, fearful of the prophecy, will come to an end, and the citizens will witness the advent of Roderick, the former sacred king. Leon asks the old man if he means the great hero from 300 years ago, and says that the man's expectations are pretty high for him. Pensive, the man says that he'll find out next year, but until then. Chloe, who has a special talent and is already learning 4th level magic, and Leon, a hardworking man whose mental strength surpasses anyone else's. He wishes to have both of them at his side, and the old man says, prophecy. On the day a man who bears the name of a lion reaches adulthood, a sword that destroys evil will descend from the heavens. In the middle of that massive crater, a sword glows with power. Leon looks at it, very tense, thinking it's a sword. Gazing at that beautiful weapon, he wonders if it fell from the sky. The weapon speaks to him, telling him to rise, leaving our hero a bit worried. Looking around nervously, he asks who's there, and the sword asks if it's not right in front of him. Confirming his suspicions, he looks tensely at the weapon. He thinks it's such a bizarre situation. This sword shines as brightly as the sun itself and speaks as if it were human. He wonders if it could be a holy sword, and out of nowhere the sword replies, that's right, adding that Leon was the one who summoned it there. Startled, he asks if he really summoned it. The sword explains that just as he always believed, the world is unfair. While those who have everything are given even more, those who have nothing lose even the little they possess. However, there are opportunities that must be granted fairly, and those who don't put in the effort have no right to blame the irrationality of life. Only those who fiercely set their lives ablaze are worthy. Then the sword asks, are you Leon, who questioned the goddess of fate's irrationality, truly worthy? Our hero closes his eyes to calm himself, then narrows them with focus. Finally, he answers yes. Beating his chest with his hand, full of determination, he says he is indeed worthy. The sword finally tells him that in that case, he must take her, and that she will give him the chance to prove his words. Our hero thinks he knows exactly what it means to wield a holy sword, but that he might be able to change everything with that weapon. Thinking of the man who helped him while he was on the ground, he reflects that his reality is truly unfair. Remembering the events from earlier that day, he still thinks. All the training he's done until now, never missing a single day. Resolved, he starts sliding down into the crater. As he gets closer to the sword, he senses its overwhelming power, and he says, concluding that all of this is unfair. That until now he's been judged regardless of his effort. He worked hard to destroy the unjust reality he couldn't accept. He doesn't want to turn his determination and effort into worthless trash, and the weapon asks him why then as he's standing before her. Leon replies that she asked him whether he was worthy or not, and he wants to prove his determination and effort, and that opportunity should be given in a fair manner. When our hero says, all right then, the sword responds, good. And a massive surge of energy erupts behind him. As the sword glows, it says that he has proven his integrity, calling him a hero. Then, shining brightly, it tells him to pull her out now. Leon asks if by hero she means the one chosen by an oracle, and the sword says it has nothing to do with oracles. It is simply her will. That his powerful mindset, which will not bow to noble blood, family, or even fate itself, and his desire to prove his convictions instead of chasing gold or fame. He is like the one who fulfills all the conditions and is worthy of becoming a hero. She tells him now he must draw her, glowing even stronger. That this was the right he earned and also an opportunity that was granted fairly. Determined, he grips the sword. That weapon says her name is Elcid, and that she is a clone of the Holy King Roderick Caldias El Vivar. She is also the sword that will guide the light of this era and tells her master, Leon, to destroy evil alongside her. Someone asks if they've been summoned and says that a holy sword and a commoner were starting to look promising. He questions whether she's asking him why he decided to break the prophecy and explains that the name Leon also means lion and isn't limited to the royal family. He says that the other Leon doesn't meet his standards. He has talent and destiny, but lacks determination, and he hasn't matured yet. And seeing how Elcid isn't complaining, he assumes she's starting to like Leon too, asking if that's it. He laughs and says things like that are rare these days. He tells her not to worry, that Leon will be even better than the last hero if he uses her inheritance, and it's time for those bastards to pay what they owe. He tells her to take a good look at the sky and asks if that isn't her job. Suddenly, our hero wakes up, apparently in a different place. He realizes he's in his bed and wonders if all of that was just a dream. Still drooling, he sits up and looks to the side, and that beautiful sword is leaning against the wall. Trying to shake it off, he realizes it wasn't a dream, and the sword speaks to him, saying she'll repeat it, that it was the opportunity he received. Nervously, he looks at the weapon, which adds that he shouldn't think he'll become stronger just because he has her now. She says he'll face far tougher challenges than the opportunity she gave him, and that those with a great destiny must endure a life equally cruel or even worse, that he may have to sacrifice the woman he loves or the friends he trusts. She explains that he chose that thorny path on his own, so he could live a special life, while our hero repeats, thorny path, and he questions the sword, asking if it wasn't supposed to be an opportunity. That seems to catch the sword slightly off guard, but she closes her little sword eye and says very well, then tells him to prepare to go to the training room immediately. She asks him to show her how he handles a sword, as she needs to know his current level in order to teach him properly. Nervous, our hero hears her say that it's a test. Looking at the sky, the sword comments that it's still quite dark and the sun hasn't risen yet. Then Elcid asks why he's been so restless since early, and he says that even if it's morning, they're still at school, and that he stands out too much, leaving Elcid a bit incredulous. Leon adds that he has no idea what excuse to make up if someone ends up bumping into him. His master realizes that even in this form, it might still be a bit difficult. So he tells him not to worry, that he has a solution, and our hero asks, a solution? Out of nowhere, the sword begins to glow intensely in his hand, and in an instant, it turns into pure energy and settles into the back of Leon's hand. The boy looks at the spot and now sees a mark made by the sacred sword. Elcid says he did this so that Leon can now use his own hand as a sheath, and that it's visible only to him in this form, so he can instruct him at any time. Leon asks if that includes when he's asleep, and his master says that sometimes he sleeps, but sometimes he doesn't. But either way, he can't do anything while Leon's asleep, and the boy says that in that case he could stand watch at night, but Elcid calls that blasphemy. Annoyed, the master tells him to cut the nonsense and just show what he's got. Then our hero says he'll probably be disappointed, but the sword says she won't be. Our hero is surprised by the unexpected response, and Elsid says that he did absolutely the best he could in the environment he was in, referring to all the effort the boy has made throughout his life. She asks what kind of master would blame a student for what they were never taught. That gives Leon a bit more determination. Then focusing, he prepares for the demonstration and delivers a powerful strike in front of him, following up with several blows filled with energy, until he realizes there's something different. He's done these movements hundreds of thousands of times before, but continuing to strike, he thinks that power is flowing into his hands only because someone trusted him. Then suddenly, Elsid tells him to stop, catching our surprised and tense hero off guard. A bit embarrassed, he asks what's wrong, saying he was just, but Elsid cuts him off and says his sword won't last like that. And suddenly, his sword shatters into several pieces, startling him. The remnants fall to the ground as something appears in front of him, and Elsid asks if he's been using it without even realizing. She explains that repetitive basic training is helpful in mastering it, but she didn't expect it to be possible for someone not using aura, and Leon asks what happened. However, Elsid says he doesn't need to know that right now, and that his skills won't improve just by trusting in them without reason. She explains she'll teach him when he's matured, and crouching down, he realizes there's no way to use that right now. Elsid says he trained the basics very well, and that she thinks teaching him how to move his body is enough. Leon asks about moving his body, and if that isn't swordsmanship. Then she asks if he thinks he can wield a sword without using his hands, leaving the boy embarrassed. She explains that knowing how to move your body properly is the foundation of martial arts, and that although he trained his body well, this is on another level. She says she'll now test his physical capabilities and tells him to run. Leon asks for how long, and Elsid says until she tells him to stop. And she tells him to execute the movements as soon as she gives the order. He'll run on one leg and even do handstands. A little scared, he thinks he's confident in his running ability. But he's never run through the training field on one leg or while doing a handstand. And even if he has no idea what that's supposed to be for, if that makes him stronger. Evaluating the situation, that man says it's an incredible canvas, one worth painting. That he heard the East has an old saying that it's like Leon is a complete vessel, and it just needs to be filled to the brim. And even if he inherits only a part of the swordsmanship and experience of the former heroes, he'll at least be able to become a master swordsman. But after 300 years, he would never allow his successor to remain only at the level of a master, and that Leon should be able to defeat a dragon with ease. He thinks that he doesn't know how powerful the demon king of this era is, but maybe half of Leon's power will be enough. Then she says, hey, why are you so surprised? I've already made up my mind, so take a good look. Well, for Leon, it'll be like the gates of hell opening. Back at the academy, Leon sleeps with his head resting on his hand. In a stern tone, Elsid calls out to the boy. He wakes up startled, saying he's listening, and that he definitely didn't fall asleep. Then back in the classroom. With great effort, he thinks that he's doing his best to pay attention in class, but he used up a lot of strength on Elsid's test. And that, aside from this class, not missing a single one of Elsid's teachings is crucial. Then the sword says she figured out where to start teaching him and asks from his point of view what he thinks he lacks. Leon says he thinks it might be swordsmanship or aura, but Elsid says he's wrong. She tells him that it's his eyes. Surprised, our hero asks, my eyes? Then she explains that there's an old proverb that says, eyes, feet, courage, strength. She explains that observation is the most important, followed by the feet, then courage. And while Leon watches in disbelief, the sword finishes by saying strength comes last. But of course, that doesn't mean she doesn't care about it. It just means the others are more important. She says there are a few things she disagrees with, but the eyes are the most important, leaving our hero thoughtful, thinking about his eyes. He wonders if his vision would improve if he rolled his eyes around, and he starts doing some weird movements. And Elsid says that now he'll learn how to see, that she'll show him how useless his eyes have been up until now. Leon is surprised and seems confused. On a beautiful day at the academy, that class continues, torturing our hero, while he wonders how to see. Is that it? Elsid tells him to look forward, and our hero does just that. He says he's using the teacher in front of the blackboard as a focal point, and that he should memorize it for just 10 seconds. So if he tries to focus, he notices a dark blue blackboard, a middle-aged man with gray hair and green eyes among other details in the scene. Elsid says the time is up and tells him to close his eyes. Our hero obeys and closes his eyes with concentration, and the sword asks how many lines were written on the blackboard, leaving our hero crushed. Leon says she asked him to look at the teacher, but Elsid corrects him, saying she said he was the focal point, not to look only at him. He thinks he was just looking at the teacher and has no idea what was on the blackboard. Elsid asks if he doesn't remember and adds that she's sure the board was in his field of vision, but that he doesn't remember anything other than the teacher. And even after looking for 10 full seconds, she asks him why he doesn't remember anything about the board. Defeated, our hero says he doesn't know, but the sword says it's simple. She explains that it's because he tried to look only at what seemed important. She says that the eyes are far more wasted than he imagines, and that maybe it's to filter out unnecessary information, but most people don't use their full field of vision. She tells him to focus on his entire field of view, and to memorize every shape reflected in his eyes as if it were a drawing. She tells him to relax his eyes, and that way he'll discover how to see more broadly. The next step will be to do that all the time, not just for 10 seconds. Our hero thinks he could say it's impossible, but he never expected the teachings to be easy, and he can't start complaining now. She tells him to look above the blackboard this time and that he has another 10 seconds. Leon says, all right. As he concentrates, it seems he draws the attention of others. The blonde Leon looks at him and calls his name, a little concerned. Then the late afternoon arrives at the academy, and our hero, looks more like a zombie than a future hero. He thinks his eyes and head feel like they're about to split in two, while Elsid says, "All right, things are going great." She explains that the fatigue in his eyes is just from them being dry or because he's tensing them unnecessarily, but that, however, the headache he's feeling is different. Because of the attribute that had been dormant until now, the pain appeared from releasing what was frozen. She explains that it's no different than muscle pain, so Leon asks if she's saying it's like a muscle ache, and the sword says that's about right, which is probably a bit different since the brain doesn't feel pain, but he should think of it that way. And besides that, they'll continue training, suddenly getting excited and looking like a maniac. He says he understands. Elsid asks him to look at the chandelier up there and asks how many candles it has, and our hero guesses 2, but the sword says it's 3, calling him an idiot. She asks if the guy who passed by 3 seconds ago was wearing glasses or not, so Leon says yes, and the master continues, asking if he was wearing a tie. A moment later, she asks if the light in the 12th room to the left was on, and our hero says it was. Then she asks about the one above it, and Leon stammers, saying yes and no almost at the same time. They keep walking around the place until they reach a shelter, and they're finally in Leon's room, where he lets out a scream inside. Holding his hands over his eyes, he writhes in pain. Elsid says it was acceptable for a first day and thinks he can be praised for not asking to stop or rest. Leon asks if she would have let him rest if he had asked, and the sword says no. Our hero wonders how long it's been since he was pushed to his limits like this, and it's been a while since his mind felt this weak. Then Elsid says that getting too comfortable can also mean he's stagnated, and that there's a limit to how far one can go just by repeating the same training. And even if there are advantages to repetitive training, it's a problem when the body finds an easy way to do it. Leon asks, "Find an easy way?" She explains that the body gets used to its own training method and that changing the method is absolutely necessary. Our hero asks if those running drills were for that reason, and the sword confirms that yes, and that it's because she needed him to become aware of the things he's not used to, and that makes the boy thoughtful. She explains that the way humans train and live their lives develops their bones, muscles, and nervous systems differently. Navigators develop a strong sense of balance, hunters develop directional sense, and nomads have exceptional vision. Leon thinks he understands that these trainings are meant to improve his strengths and compensate for his weaknesses, and that Elsid decided to start with that first. The sword says his strengths are the stamina built from continuous training, his mindset, and the fundamentals of swordsmanship, from practicing basic movements, and the weakness is the rigidity caused by excessive repetition and a lack of mental and physical flexibility. Leon asks about aura and swordsmanship, but Elsid seems a little annoyed. She says that in the end, swordsmanship is just how you wield a sword, and if he can apply fundamental movements and adapt them to situations, that already is swordsmanship. She explains that of course there are extremely powerful sword styles, but irritated, she slams her forehead against Leon's and asks who would teach something like that to someone with nothing but a promise of loyalty. And using his head a bit, our hero says she's right, while the sword watches him closely. She continues, saying that when it comes to aura, there's not much to say for now, and asks if the other Leon defeated him using aura, and says that someone like him learning aura, that would raise suspicion among many people, so she'll teach him about aura once he leaves the academy, and that for now, he should focus on mastering how to see. Then she asks if he doesn't want to beat that guy as soon as possible. Determined, Leon says, "Right, I'm getting super hyped." But the sword says that's not enough, and the boy asks, what? She asks if she hasn't already said it. He'll get used to repetitive training even if he focuses on it, recalling the nervous teacher who noticed a student watching him that way. She says he's bound to get bored with the same training method. Leon thinks he's getting a bad feeling about this. Stammering a bit, he asks Elsid what they're going to do then, and the sword says it's nothing major. She'll just give him a punishment every time he answers something wrong, to the point where he won't have any kind of leisure to get used to, and they'll start that tomorrow. Leon is filled with dread as he thinks, punishment. Elsid says she's not bullying him for no reason. It's just a very effective method called operant conditioning. She says that although his mentality and willpower are useful, he still needs a push. Our hero stammers, saying, "Even so." He thinks the sword is right, and that if he's going to get punished sooner or later, he might as well make up his mind and get started already. And with that, he'll be able to develop the corresponding resilience as well. Elsid asks if the boy really wants to go through with this, and he nods with a thumbs up, saying, "All right, bring it on." But the very next moment, he lets out a huge scream, suffering intensely. The sword asks if that was really only 5 seconds, while our hero collapses onto the bed, passed out. Elsid explains that since it was the first one, she couldn't calibrate it properly and that she'll hold back and go easier next time. Smiling, she says that either way, she'll raise the intensity if he keeps making mistakes, and all he has to do is get it right, and everything will be fine. Excited, she says they'll give it their all tomorrow, while our hero lies fried on the floor, thinking that this damn sword is demonic. The sun rises over the academy, and our hero is already out there giving his all once again, with that sword, or maybe that spirit, perched on his shoulder. During class, the teacher is visibly uncomfortable with the strange stares from one of the students. Back in his quarters, he trains hard, pushing his body to the limit. Outside, Elsid asks how many pigeons are on the dorm rooftop, and our hero answers 10. Then she asks which one would fly off first, and he says the 6. She asks how many pigeons are sitting on the open window, and Leon says there aren't any pigeons. There's a crow. Elsid says that wasn't bad at all, considering it's only been a month, and it was really hard to spot the crow. But even so, he almost failed. Overly hopeful, Leon asks so. Then the sword says they'll stop here and rest, and celebrating a lot. Our hero thinks that he'll finally get a break after an entire month. And the blonde Leon suddenly appears, calling out to the boy, catching him off guard and leaving him flustered. There's a brief silence between them for a few seconds. Then he turns with a challenging look and says it's been a while, Leon. He thinks he hasn't seen him since starting his training with Elsid, but putting that aside, he figures it's been about half a month since he last talked to Chloe. The blonde boy says he's been training right after lunch, and that's pretty typical of him. He says he came by because he was a bit worried, but now he's relieved, and our hero asks, worried about what? He says that since it's been a month since he challenged him, he thought he had given up like everyone else, but adds that judging by his face, he looks quite eager. Then Leon asks if it's that obvious, and the other boy says yes, while smiling. He explains that the faces of people who think they can beat him are very different from his. Leon smiles, satisfied with that information, and says, yeah, good for you. So that's why you came looking for me during lunch. Then why don't you leave now that you've finished your business? The blonde boy says he's so cold and says it's been a while since they talked like this, asking why not talk a bit more? Provocatively, our hero asks what they even have to talk about, so the boy smiles and says 10 minutes would be enough. Leon scratches his head, unsure how to respond. In the end, he gives in and sits beside the boy. They sit in silence for a few seconds, just appreciating the view. Then the blonde Leon breaks the silence, saying he must have heard the rumor, the one claiming he's not a commoner. Finding it ironic, our Leon asks, rumor, huh? And asked if there was really any need to bring that up, saying it didn't seem like he was trying to hide it, and whether he should be speaking to him more formally. The boy says he didn't start the conversation because of that, and to think of what he's saying is coming from the Leon who hides his identity, not from his upperclassmen. Our hero is a bit surprised by his words, but relaxes and says of course. Then the other boy asks if he knows why he accepted the duels in the first place. Remembering those moments, our Leon says yes. And the boy wouldn't have been affected if he refused. He could have just avoided the duels without revealing his identity, and they kept going only out of his goodwill. Annoyed, he thinks this is nothing more than the generosity of a victor, and that compared to him, as long as Leon commits to this. Suddenly, the blonde boy says they should just end it already, catching our hero off guard and making him a little nervous. The incredulous boy asks if he really means end it, and the other says there was no need to keep dragging it out like this. He reinforces that the next duel should be the last, one fought with pure swordsmanship, no aura, and using real swords instead of wooden ones. Our hero feels impacted by the request and tries to process the idea little by little. With a challenging look, the blonde adds that if he wins the fight, the boy will become his subordinate. Anxious, the boy wonders if this is some sort of declaration to decide the hierarchy and says to the other boy that this is basically some kind of wager. He asks what guarantee there is for that promise since it's not a magical contract, but something verbal, which could be broken at any time. The blonde agrees that if it were someone else, that would be the case. But the boy is an inflexible man who got here out of pride and will believe in his word. He also reinforces that the boy is the type who will keep a promise no matter the reason. Leon checks that the condition of the duel is that if he loses, he becomes the other's subordinate, and the boy confirms while Leon wants to say something more right after. Excited, he asks what happens if he defeats the blonde. It seems that thought really gives our hero renewed motivation. However, Leon doesn't even flinch at that possibility. He then says he'll give in whatever he wants as long as it doesn't endanger his honor or his family's, be it aura techniques, arcane swordsmanship, anything. Smiling, Leon says, all right, I'll decide on the day of the duel, okay. As he walks away, the blonde tells him to let him know when he's ready, since the location will need preparation, so he needs to know 3 days in advance. Each of them walks off with resolve. That man says their moment has finally arrived, Leon, who is chosen by the whims of the sacred sword, and Leon, the prince trying to seize the throne, and that this is the moment when their true duel will begin. But something's wrong with our hero. He seems just a little nervous about all of this. Not understanding, the being asks what's going on. He questions whether the boy is nervous and afraid after coming so far, since he was doing just fine a moment ago. Leon answers that it's not really like that, and then he honestly wants to know if he's gotten stronger. Elsid seems puzzled by that response. As he looks at his hand, covered in marks, the boy says that even though the past month's training was really tough. Anxiously, he adds that he doesn't feel like he's gotten stronger. The sword listens without responding, wearing a thoughtful expression. The talking weapon explains that even if the boy doesn't realize it, he's much stronger now, and because of that, he doesn't need to worry. Elsid adds that vision is a different kind of strength, which is why Leon can't sense it since he hasn't used it properly. But she says she's taken other measures besides that. Interrupting the conversation, the being asks if the boy has a physical assessment later, and the other agrees. He says to wait because something beyond imagination is about to happen, and stretches his arm back. The being smiles, betting that the boy won't be able to back up what he just said. Slightly concerned, Leon doesn't know what to expect. A man tells several boys to form a line according to their numbers, and that anyone who isn't feeling well should step out, while the rest begin to warm up. Miserably nervous, the boy remembers that in the last assessment, he was the 9th to be called. Even though physical ability is evaluated without mana, the top rankings were filled with nobles, and taking that into account, 9th was the limit. Elsid asks about the other Leon's rank, and the boy replies that he's first. The sword says that makes sense since the blonde seems to have trained a lot, although not as much as our hero, and he's not even comparable to the spoiled brats from the other noble houses. Even though they're running a short distance race, it's 2 laps around the field, which should be 800 meters, and in that race, the other scored 1 minute and 20 seconds. Meanwhile, dark-haired Leon did it in 1 minute and 40 seconds, and because of those 20 seconds of difference, the other boy is unmatched. The sword, full of confidence, tells the boy not to be scared before trying. After all, the hero now has her as an ally. As the boy processes what he just heard, he says he'll put his trust in Elsid. The boys prepare to run. The evaluator announces that the race begins as he waves the flag, and everyone starts with the goal of getting there as fast as possible. Someone clearly isn't playing around and gives it their all, leaving the others stunned. Even blonde Leon is one of the people left speechless. The boy dashes far ahead of everyone else. He pushes himself hard and stays in first place. The boy is running as fast as the famous blue hedgehog. A girl holding a stopwatch calls out to him. She announces that Leon finished the run in 1 minute and 29 seconds, and the boy gets super excited, while his main rival looks a bit nervous. The evaluator approaches and asks if the boy has learned aura, to which he replies that he hasn't. The mana has to confirm that this power truly wasn't used. He grabs the boy's arm while seemingly reading his mana. Leon believes the man is searching for something by infusing mana into him and knows that if he did know how to use aura, it would be immediately dispelled during the test. In disbelief, the man realizes the hero hasn't learned it, but still can't believe he changed so much in just a few weeks and asks what kind of training he did. Shyly, the boy replies that he only trained the fundamentals since he had more breaks than before. The man reviews his documents thoughtfully, noting that the boy's training volume used to be abnormally high. He asks if the boy's body improved from the rest after so many years of work, but soon after dismisses the idea as nonsense while the others look at him with envy. Blonde Leon also seems uncomfortable in some way with the situation. The hero quietly asks Elsid what might have happened. Casually, the sword says that things turned out just as he had said they would, and Leon nervously asks the sacred object to give him answers. However, before addressing that, she asks where he thinks strength comes from, biologically speaking. As they watch Helmut full of energy with his papers, the young man replies, from the muscles. Elsid explains that in that world, most physical training methods focus on increasing muscle mass, but that's only half the journey. She also says that within the concept of the nervous system, muscles have neurons connected to them, and the strength they can exert depends on the development of those neurons. Strength doesn't depend solely on someone's physical appearance because of myoneural connections, and Leon, struggling to understand, thinks to himself that he's never heard of this before. Muscle density is decided by innate factors, and there's a limit to how big a muscle can get, something the boy had already reached through intense training. In conclusion, Elsid explains that she focused on developing the hero's nervous system, to which he replies that he kinda understood. Still confused, the boy asks how exactly the sword did that, saying he didn't undergo that kind of training and guessing something happened while he was asleep. The weapon reveals that it was part of the punishment inflicted on Leon, and he's completely stunned by the answer. For a moment, the boy returns to the private reality where only he can see and talk to the magical object, and goes silent while no one else understands his reaction. Because something dormant had been released, that's why his muscles hurt so much, and the pain he felt in every failed vision training session was part of the nervous system's development process. The hero asks why Elsid didn't explain that earlier, and the sword replies, because then you get more depressed. Leon makes a strange expression, hard to read. As he listens to the sword talk about how mastering vision was his way to escape the pain, the boy recalls a moment with a teacher. Then he remembers another moment with a student while reflecting on how hearing the reason for the punishment made him realize he needed to go through it. Elsid believes that if the hero hadn't gone through all that, he wouldn't have been so focused. And finally, she leaves a suggestion in the air for him to thank her. Sacred sword, I just did what was expected of me, and I feel great now that things are going so well. Leon wonders if the object doesn't resemble more a demonic sword. He also questions whether the sword really is fused with the soul and personality of the great hero Roderick, and if that meant Roderick was actually a villain, not a hero. As they're snapping back to reality, the boy hears the other students cheering joyfully about something else. And there it is, as expected, blonde Leon broke his own record. The boy gives a triumphant look directed at the hero, and the hero responds to that look with clear irritation. The irritation is justified. After all, the boy took second place and couldn't beat his main rival. It would be strange if he could surpass the other in just 1 month, and he shouldn't try to feel satisfied. But deep down, something still bothers him. Even so, Leon, who used to be ranked somewhere between 1st and 9th, has now climbed to 2nd place. Excited, he believes he can win, or rather, that he will win. Back in the student dormitories that night. Already ready to rest, the boy asks about the type of training they'll begin the next day, and Elsid responds that the vision training went beyond just practicing memorization. She says there's nothing more to be done regarding physical capacity, so it would be better to gain experience in applying what he learned, and the boy says it'll be hard in real battles. Because of that, the sword suggested they leave the academy. Leon eagerly asks, "You could teach me swordsmanship," but the sacred object already tries to dismiss that idea, saying it's just a dream. She explains that to learn swordsmanship, he needs to assimilate aura first, because doing that is more than enough to use the fundamentals up to a certain point. Martial arts without aura are nothing but cheap tricks. Even if called secret techniques, they're only hard to deal with the first time you see them. The hero would become easy to counter once his moves are read, and Elsid also asks if he thinks the other Leon would fall for such mediocre tricks. Frustrated, the boy asks what he can do, and Elsid tells him to use his emotions. Recalling blonde Leon's victory and also of his own improved time, the sacred object says a sword that's been trained with effort for a long time is powerful. Leon's physical capabilities have increased to a similar level, and now not even his main rival will be able to defeat him. After taking a deep breath, the sword adds a "but." She says the boy needs real battle experience and asks if there's anyone who would start a fight with him. The boy cuts that train of thought off right away, saying there's no one like that at the academy. The next day, the hero was still thinking about the discussions with Elsid. Suddenly, someone asks the young man if he's the commoner named Leon. A group of boys watches him from the stairs. As he pays more attention to the group, the boy notices a badge on one of their uniforms and concludes they're from the noble class. Angrily, they question how a commoner got second place. They're certain the young man used a trick that even fooled the instructor, but the three of them won't be fooled. Leon thinks to himself how amazing it is that jerks like this exist everywhere, and he speaks to the boys about their problem with the rankings. Our hero says the group should complain to the instructor if they're not satisfied with the rankings, and the trio, in disbelief, wonders how a guy like him dares to talk to them that way. The guys ask how they're supposed to know what kind of trick the boy used, especially since he didn't swear loyalty, and it was already suspicious for him to be in 9th place from the beginning. They believe the real him finally showed his face and ask which family is backing him. Leon notices they're not paying attention to what he's saying. The hero thinks they probably didn't even intend to talk in the first place, and that in their eyes he's just an annoying weed they want to rip out. Another person appears behind the boys on the stairs. The newcomer tells them not to be upset, and adds that even if the boy is a commoner, they're all students from the same academy. The audience that had gathered to hear all the taunting shows signs of admiration. Lord Elmont explains that they can call the punishment nobles impose dignity. After finishing his statement, he asks what the others think, and they agree with the man, saying it's what's expected from the pride of the Bourbon family. Elsid asks if that's the leader of the group and if he belongs to a major family, and the hero answers that he's the second son of the Bourbon family. This guy was always second in the physical exam. He's probably irritated that Leon took his place. The behavior of nobles going after the weak and the weak retaliating against nobles is always the same, and Elmont says it's a shame his first encounter with Leon is happening like this. The young man says the hero might feel wronged by this, but nobles can't just accept things quietly. He extends his hand and says, "I hope you accept our proposal." The boy replies that he wants to hear what the proposal is first. The other nobles react angrily to that response, but Lord Elmont silences them with a gesture. Elmont suggests they have a few matches under the supervision of an instructor. With a defiant look, Leon reflects that this is how things are going to be. The two young men share a calmer smile. It may seem like the noble made a generous offer by bringing in an instructor, but our hero knows he's at a clear disadvantage in this proposal. Since Elmont didn't include a condition against using aura, that means he'll be using it to his advantage. He understands that if he raises an objection, the others will try to pressure him by saying he's deceiving the instructor. And he also knows that even if he refuses the duel, they'll obviously try to defame him in some other way. Leon turns his head to look at something. His eyes meet blonde Leon's in the middle of the crowd. The hero believes it would be possible for the other to get him out of that situation. Right after, the young man clenches his teeth. Thoughtful, the boy knows that relying on his rival's help would be nothing more than begging for aid. And imagining that it would be a humiliation even greater and harsher than the ongoing provocation, Leon accepts the duel. Raising his eyebrows, Elmont shows mild surprise that the boy accepted his proposal. In return, the hero requests that Helmut supervise the fight, that it be one person per day, and that the other promise never to question his skills again if he wins. He then asks if the noble can accept the counteroffer. Leon suggests this because the Academy's demonic instructor can spot any trick, and coincidentally, upon being mentioned, the man feels his ear warm up. In the end, the Lord accepts his terms. Our boy doesn't care who will supervise the fight, but he thinks it's a shame he won't be able to beat them up until he's satisfied. Back in his dorm room, the boy says that Bastard had that look on his face, and that he never imagined he'd gain real battle experience that way. Elsid sees that in terms of results, it's great. With some hesitation, Leon asks if the sword thinks he can beat him without using aura. It adds that he guesses not, since he's never fought someone who can use aura. The secret object seems to have a brilliant idea and asks if she should show him how to make things easier. Not quite understanding the question, the boy replies with another, "What?" Very excited, Elsid snaps her fingers, saying that this method should be easiest. And a terminal appears in front of our hero, displaying his name, his level -18, some skills, and a class that says he's a hero, who still doesn't use aura. A bit surprised, he asks the sword what that is, to which she replies, "What else would it be? It's what you're capable of right now." Then she changes the screen and says these are the stats of that brat Elmont. She explains that she wrote it based on his standards, so it's not very objective. Surprised, our hero asks if that brat Elmont is really that weak. He says that if he's the second son of Count's family, he's probably consumed every kind of elixir and received all sorts of training to get stronger. But Elsid explains that even if someone takes lots of elixirs, if they can't digest them, they'll turn out average, and his training likely doesn't compare to Leon's. She says people might think that without aura, he'd be like a rank E with only 99 points. However, she says that Leon can surpass that limit, referring to his heavy training and rapid development. Elsid adds that with her help and his own hard work, even without aura, he'd still be capable of facing those fools, and that leaves our hero a bit surprised. He asks if what she means is that he won't lose in terms of physical ability, and that in that case, it's fine. It's just as Elsid said. The sword stands there blankly, waiting for him to reflect. While our hero thinks that from now on, he'll aim for the top, not below. That there's no way he'll lose to someone like Elmont looking determined and full of courage. But he questions why the terminal says his title is a hero who still can't use aura, and then Elsid says that if he doesn't like it, he should just get stronger. It was a beautiful day at one of the gates of the place. Our hero was walking down the corridors until someone suddenly calls out to him. And looking to the side, he sees the instructor watching him. The man says he seems to have changed a lot in a month, and says that he would have stopped him if he were acting recklessly, but it seems he doesn't need to do that. Then he asks the boy if he isn't, and our hero replies that he's not sure what he's talking about. Smiling, the man says he's pretending not to know and tells him to do his best, though Leon still doesn't understand what's going on. Excited by the idea, Helmut tells him to teach those idiots a lesson and asks if our hero understood. And now Leon seems to have gotten the message. Entering that hall, we see it's already full of people. Right after, Leon walks in with a determined look. As soon as he enters, someone calls out to him. With a scowl on his face, the boy asks how he, a mere commoner, dares to make him wait, and says he's acting like the rules don't apply to him. Ignoring all of that, he turns to the instructor and says he'll begin now, and the man says that's fine. The instructor then says that both of them will be putting their names and honor on the line in this match with him as a witness. Then he asks Jeff Heinrich what he wishes from this match. Furiously, he says he wants that commoner to admit his own crimes while our hero watches him with a serious look. Then Helmut asks what Leon wants from this match, and the boy explains that he wants this duel to be the last time he ever gets bothered by him. Clapping his hands, the man says all right. He orders both of them to take 2 steps forward and to stand in position. Clove and Leon watch the match, thinking he's at a disadvantage for not being able to use aura, and that even a wooden sword can cut if aura is being used. Elcid asks our hero if he wants to see the boy's stats, but he replies no, that it's fine. Because no matter how strong he is, he's still just Elmont's subordinate, and there's no reason to borrow Elcid's power for someone like that. But out of nowhere, the boy rushes into the arena. Screaming, he charges at our hero with his wooden sword. Leon thinks he's coming in with a diagonal slash from the upper right to the lower left, and thinks that since it's such an obvious move, he'll wait. That maybe it's actually a fake out. So he waits for the attack to come and watches the sword descending toward his head. Our hero wonders, this guy, why is he so slow? And with a swift counterattack, he dodges the boy's strike and hits him on the head. This greatly surprises the instructor, and it also scares the boy's friends. Even Chloe and blonde Leon are shocked by that move. Heinrich stands there frozen with a mark on his forehead, drooling and trembling slightly. A bit nervous, our hero looks back, wondering what that boy's deal is. And to his complete surprise, he collapses to the ground like a tree trunk, while Leon wonders if it really ended that fast. Groaning in pain on the ground, the boy struggles to say, you. Getting up with great difficulty, he tells the boy not to think he won with that lucky shot, that he just made a mistake. Then, irritated, he says to go again, that he should fight him once more. The instructor says Jeff Heinrich lost and that he won't allow any unpleasant behavior, while our hero smiles and says, all right then. And that response surprises both the boy and Helmut. Laughing hard, Heinrich says that for a commoner, he sure knows his place. Excited, Leon says fine, he won't go easy on him this time. Suddenly, the sword speaks to him and tells him not to end it in one strike this time. So while the two face each other, the instructor commands them to begin. Elcid says it's his first time using his vision in a real battle, considering that he volunteered to be his training partner, and that he should know ending it in one hit was just Leon being merciful. So our hero says, got it. Then the boy charges wildly at Leon with another exaggerated strike. Our hero blocks the attack with ease. Focusing, he applies the teachings on vision, and realizes that the guy is so slow he can see the movements of his arms, his legs, and even his pupils, thus predicting his next move. Elcid says that because he figured out his initial movements, Leon can tell what he'll do next. Heinrich keeps attacking, and our boy continues to defend skillfully. But this time something different happens. He notices that the boy's wooden sword slices a bit of his hair. He then realizes that Heinrich started using aura, but even so, he can still read his movements. Screaming wildly, the boy tells him to try his best to dodge these attacks. Elcid says to think he'd recklessly go on the offensive like this against someone who just beat him. He's an amateur, doesn't even know how to distribute his stamina throughout the fight. While defending, Leon thinks that even the enhancement of physical skills through aura has its limits. After the block, our hero seems to have noticed something. He realizes he found an opening and attacks without mercy, hitting the boy's leg. Clearly, he feels the strike, becoming furious right after. Heinrich then jumps farther away, putting distance between himself and Leon. While holding his injured leg, he calls his opponent a fool and says he should have finished him off already. Yelling, he says Leon won't be able to bring him down with that kind of attack. But in the next moment, something seems wrong, and the boy is struck by a flurry of blows in quick succession. Elcid asks our hero what he thinks, and Leon replies that it's just as she said. If he wants to use vision during training, a moving target is best. Getting up again, Heinrich, desperate, says he gives up. Instructor Helmut announces that the winner is Leon, and the spectators cheer the result, except for Heinrich's buddies who are scared and a bit nervous. Later that night, people comment on whether they saw the duel between Leon and Elmont's clique. One guy says he didn't know Leon could fight that well. He started challenging each one of them, beginning with Jeff, and they all lost, having to be sent to the infirmary after the fight. In the end, the only one left was Elmont, and someone questions whether Elmont would really lose to him. Elcid says they were such easy opponents, using a very elegant fencing style, but without soul. She says she can't believe they're at that level, even while using aura, but our hero says he believes today will be different. And the sword says today it's Elmont, and that it's important not to lower his guard. Our hero enters the arena and meets his opponent. Elmont stands there seriously, waiting for Leon, while emanating his aura. Elcid says it looks like the guy stopped being arrogant, and our boy agrees that it does seem that way. Leon thinks that Elmont, using his aura, is physically stronger than him, and there was something in the status window that the sword showed earlier. It said sword vision, but he thinks that since it's only level 1, it probably isn't very powerful. He believes unknown techniques are the scariest, and there's a chance he won't be able to see through it with his special vision. Appearing satisfied with the situation, Elmont says he didn't expect his turn would actually come. With a calm expression, our hero replies, "Is that so?" and tells him he already knew this would happen, which really irritates the man. He thinks Leon will be the perfect sparring opponent to prepare for the duel with the other Leon. And even though he has great physical skills even without aura, he's weaker if aura is taken into account. Because if Elmont is at the level where he can imbue even his sword with aura, it'll be dangerous to try and block his attacks with a wooden sword. Aware of that, Leon thinks that in this case, He wonders if he should avoid a direct fight and try to provoke him first, while Helmut commands the match to begin. At that moment, an energy blast passes right by our hero's face, catching him completely off guard. A small cut appears on his cheek, and he wonders if that was sword energy. In the arena, Elmont points his aura-charged sword at our boy. Leon starts to think he might not be able to face him because the speed difference between them is enormous. His opponent gets into stance using his frightening aura. Our hero thinks that although he's a scumbag, he's still a direct descendant of a Count's family. Smiling, the boy says it's no wonder the others lost. He says he would have trampled him if he were just an arrogant commoner, but it's a different story if he's someone worth recruiting. And that if he considers joining him right now, you can forget about the trivial feelings between them, but it seems like something is quickly approaching him. Dodging by a hair, our boy's sword brushes past his face. Once again, the opponent's reposition in the arena, and a cut appears on Elmont's cheek, while he, irritated, says, "You." Now furious, he shouts that Leon is arrogant, and it's only because he picked up a few useless skills. Smiling, our hero asks, "Is that so?" And Elsid, offended, repeats, "Useless skills." Then she calls out to Leon, who replies, "Yes," asking if that little weakling just called her skill useless, didn't he? A bit startled, Leon calls out to Elsid. Elsid says people say even rivers and mountains change in 10 years, yet after 300 years, she's being mocked by a bedwetting brat. Leon senses that out of nowhere, threatening aura emerges. He asks if our hero can see the kid with the white teeth, and stammering a bit, he replies that he can. He says that an insult a teacher can receive is to be scolded by a student, and if that boy's teeth stay intact until the end of this test, then he'll be punished for it. Our hero thinks that 1 or 2 teeth won't be enough, so he'll pull out as many as he can. Elmont looks a bit surprised at Leon, asking what kind of vigor that is. With incredible agility, our hero launches himself at his opponent. He starts attacking the boy, who defends himself as best he can. Helmut is surprised by the strength of those blows. And in the stands, the people watching comment that Elmont is being pushed back, but blonde Leon says no. He says Leon is on the offensive, but Elmont hasn't been knocked out of the ring yet. In the arena, our hero thinks this sucks, that he's trying too hard, and if it weren't for his opponent's aura. In the stands, blonde Leon says that if things keep going like this, it'll turn into a battle of attrition. Full of rage, the opponent complains that the boy is persistent and that he should have stayed in the last inconvenient spot, lying on the ground. Ready to keep going, the boy replies that the other should look at who's talking. He prepares to compensate for his lack of strength and speed with Roderick's vision. This power allows him to anticipate the opponent's actions, and Leon believes that if he can see the attack just a little faster, he'll be able to make up for his disadvantage. He needs to read movements much more precisely, more quickly, and more broadly too, until something happens to the opponent in front of him. What madness! It's like they're fighting underwater. Our hero seems to block an attack, moving nearly at the speed of light, and positions himself in a mirrored stance to the other. Excited, the boy realizes his plan is working. Even angrier, Elmont curses at him, asking if he really can't use aura. The examiner still doesn't detect any aura from the hero, but still can't believe he managed to push his opponent back this far. Now with a wicked smile, the other says he can't believe he's being forced to use something against the boy. Feeling quite uneasy, Leon becomes suspicious of what it could be. Elmont activates a power around his body and weapon, and the boy thinks it's arcane fencing. He's annoyed because his enemy can do all sorts of things with the sword: thrust, stab, and slash. Using his own power, the boy knows he can't waste a single second. The other young man approaches to strike, and Leon realizes he's going for a stab and that he can dodge it. Elmont comes in full force, and our hero manages to evade. However, something else happens after the strike that the boy didn't expect. That attack was a feint. It's a technique that assumes the opponent will dodge. Warbin's secret technique that goes for a direct blow to the torso, and even if you try to dodge, it'll hit the ribs and you can't fight with broken ribs. Even being able to see the sword's path with his vision, he can't escape it. Leon thinks, "I'm going to get hit and I'm going to lose." His eyes light up more intensely and his hair stands on end, resembling a famous fighter, while he thinks urgently to himself, "Move." The boy seems to force himself so hard into the ground that part of his clothes rip with a kind of intense power. But that power was to jump over his opponent. Elmont looks up, tense and in disbelief at what he's done. Meanwhile, from above, our hero strikes the boy hard, who clearly feels the blow. Leon lands behind the boy, who stands there, stunned that he was hit. He glares at our hero, visibly angry, and someone comments that he only hit the left arm and wonders if, since it's 1 arm versus 2, that wouldn't be a disadvantage for Elmont. Blonde Leon tells Claude to forget the injured arm because he's sure the real danger is the shock from the Bourbon family's arcane fencing failing. Elmont thinks not yet, and that he'll gain the advantage for having both hands for a frontal strike. And when he does, the durability of the wooden sword will reach its limit because of his aura-powered attacks. So he decides to break Leon's sword to win. Charging our hero, he shouts that Leon has been dancing in his palm the whole time and calls him a commoner. And with an upward strike, Leon lands a direct hit, disarming the boy. Elmont seems to not really understand what just happened. But in the next moment, he takes a heavy blow to the mouth, spitting upward. With that powerful attack, his teeth fly in all directions. In the audience, everyone seems to celebrate the fight, and Chloe looks very happy for her friend. Then Helmut, quite satisfied, declares Leon the winner. A little later, Elsid says it was a great job by her disciple, since he was defeated by a useless technique, and now he'll choose his words more carefully. Leon wonders if his character will improve after being defeated just once, and that it should be fine since they made an oath about the duel's winner. But Elsid says that instead, she was actually very surprised, leaving our hero confused. She explains that he just opened the door to acceleration, and that he's progressing much faster than she expected. Not really understanding, something, Leon asks, acceleration? Picking up teeth from the floor, Helmut thinks that he definitely knocked out quite a few. Sometime later, our hero walks through the halls, massaging his shoulder. Meanwhile, he asks Elsid if acceleration was what he did when dodging Elmont's arcane fencing. She explains by asking if he knows that there are moments when the human body moves slower than the mind. And that, especially in a state of acceleration, a reflex can be faster than conscious thought, and it has nothing to do with actual speed. So in that case, she asks how Leon thinks trained swordsmen move so fast. Our hero replies that it's because they learn to use aura. And Elsid says he's only partially right, because if you don't use aura, your body won't be able to withstand its own power. So normally only a few people are able to learn acceleration after they've learned aura. But she says Leon used acceleration even before starting to use aura, and he only used it in his legs. Even if it was an incomplete execution, it was still very impressive. That means he instinctively surpassed his limits through sheer willpower. Smiling, our hero says, "Huh, wait a minute." He asks if Elsid didn't say his body wouldn't handle the power, but that he feels perfectly fine and wonders if it's because the execution was incomplete. The sword says it's something like that, and if he had used it across his whole body, his insides would have been turned inside out. Leon, now worried, asks if that isn't a little dangerous. Elsid then says that it must be time, and that he should take care of his body for now. So our hero asks what she's talking about. He questions what time, and out of nowhere, he takes heavy damage from the side effect of acceleration. The sword says, what else? Of course it's muscle pain. And she adds that he should be grateful he's only experiencing it after using acceleration, and warns him not to use it again until he learns aura or else he'll die. Feeling the pain intensely, our hero says he knows that too. Another day there at the academy. Our hero walks through the campus among the students. Some girls murmur something as he passes by, and everyone seems to be whispering things about Leon. Some say they heard he was experimented on and fed elixirs. Another says he hides his true identity and is his secret weapon from the palace. Then he bumps into the group of friends he beat up, concluding that those guys must have spread plenty of rumors about him. Elsid says they'll show up with all kinds of excuses for having lost and questions the noble's pride. But Leon says that if they had any, they wouldn't have come to him. So the sword says that's a fair point, while our hero seems to spot something. And in front of him appears Chloe with a gentle look. Then the girl says, "Hi, Leon." A bit surprised, our hero says, "Chloe." Then sometime later, outside the building. Smiling, he asks how she's doing, and if she's not supposed to be in alchemy class right now, and asks if she's skipping class. Chloe calls him an idiot and asks why she would skip class. Then says the teacher was sick and there was no class, and asks if he really thinks she'd do that just to meet him. Then she goes silent and smiles. Leaning on a chair, she says something has changed, and our hero is confused. Then she asks if he's been avoiding talking to her lately. And out of nowhere, he started fighting a bunch of nobles. She asks him if he has any idea how worried she and Leon were. This surprises our Leon. He lowers his head, thoughtful. And while getting scolded, he thinks about how much time has passed for him to be able to talk to her in such a comfortable and open way. Then he thinks, that's it. Now I think I understand. How he felt about her. How jealous he was that Leon got to be by her side. He felt overwhelmed by his own inferiority complex, thinking he had nothing special. He thinks he hated this world where he wasn't rewarded for his hard work, and blamed himself for it. He remembers when the sword appeared, when he faced it, saying that in that case, it would give him the chance to prove what he'd said. Chloe says that after those fights, his name is on everyone's lips at the school, and there are even rumors that he only improved because he randomly picked up a magic sword. Then the girl looks at him for a moment, and our hero is crying. She's a bit surprised and tense about the situation, and she tries to soften it by asking why he's crying all of a sudden, saying those are just rumors, and that the part about the sword probably went too far. Leon explains that it's nothing like a magic sword. Chloe keeps looking at him, worried. She thinks that even though Elsid speaks rudely and has a terrible personality, she picked him up when he was at rock bottom. Meanwhile, that man was eating a little cookie, and said, "What, Leon, you little brat, I had already apologized since the mood seemed nice." Elsid wonders why he suddenly grew, even just a little. Then Leon thinks that if a hero is someone who saves the world, then his hero is Elsid. So he decides that he'll become a hero just as capable, as the wielder of the sacred sword, and surpass Elsid's expectations. Chloe keeps looking at him without really understanding. That man says he doesn't quite get it. He was just talking to a girl, and suddenly he's grown a bit more. He wonders if that's something he, someone who's been perfect since birth, should understand. And the sword says she doesn't care about the reason, but that now he finally seems worthy of being cultivated. And out of nowhere, our hero suddenly gets uncomfortable and covered in goosebumps, with his friend worriedly calling out to him. At night in the students' quarters, our hero is lying down, deep in thought. He thinks he really has changed. He remembers Chloe saying he seemed a lot better now, and that confused our hero. She explains that he no longer looks nervous and can look ahead. She says he looks like Leon, but there's a difference, like one person looking up and the other looking forward. Leon is surprised by what she says, that he thinks it would be nice if he could talk to Leon occasionally, that there's no one in his year who could be honest about their feelings and stand by his side. So he said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." Curled up in bed, he apologizes to Chloe. Apologizing, he thinks that he doesn't believe he can do it, and that their next duel will be the last, and he thinks, In another place, blonde Leon watches the night. Thoughtful and reflecting, he says, "Leon." The next day, someone slams hard into a training dummy. Our hero is there and has just destroyed another wooden sword, while Elsid wonders if not even a perfect condition training sword can last. and that besides technique proficiency training, his style is so powerful that it puts too much strain on the sword, and a training sword is weaker than a real one. Leon says he pushed himself to succeed once because a person's trump card can only be shown once, and since it would be obvious he'd be countered by a genius like Leon if he kept using the same move, he thinks he'll overcome his techniques, read what he's thinking, and beat him. Alcid asks if seeing Leon's status window a few days ago irritated him that much. On the terminal, it said blonde Leon was level 25, had many skills, and was a swordsman with both talent and noble lineage. Exalted, he asks if an intermediate aura user can use an energy blade, and adds that blonde Leon can also use aura on his body, and that he's already stronger than the instructors at a level only the most talented knights reach by their 30s. Leon assesses the data and realizes that even though he loses in strength and agility, he has a bit more stamina, and that he's definitely a tough opponent. And getting fired up, he says he's not someone he can't beat. Alcid says that's a good mindset, and says she'll give him as much advice as she can, that he should use that as a foundation to prepare to win his duel against the other Leon, and our hero looks excited about it. Then he calls for Alcid and says, Alcid, if and only if he loses against Leon, what does he plan to do after that? The sword is surprised but says it won't answer that. Leon asks why, and he says it's a test for him, and asks if he didn't already say this at the beginning, that the trials he will endure will be harder than having opportunities. A bit uneasy, he asks if this isn't a bit too difficult for a first trial, and Alcid says this fight could become the turning point of his life. He adds that if he wins against Leon, then he'll explain everything, and that he'll understand why after hearing the explanation. The day goes on as our hero continues his intense training, until the weather begins to turn and a heavy rain falls. Elsewhere, someone says the results are above expectations. A man says he knew the others weren't that bad, while the blonde Leon watches the rain at the window, but he didn't think he would defeat Elmont. Leon says to Sir Gilbert that it seems he acknowledges the results now and remembers him saying he wasn't so sure about his evaluations before. Smiling, the old man says that was 3 years ago, and for the right person, that's not a long time. Since he defeated the second son of a count's family, with a body that can't use aura, they can now conclude there's no reason to doubt his potential anymore. He mentions that he had a message from Leon today, and it said he's ready. Excited, the old man says finally, and then the young man says, Sir Gilbert, and that he would like to ask him for a favor, thinking he'll defeat Leon, and that he'll definitely make him his knight. And beyond that, he speaks while thinking of Chloe. The rain keeps pouring heavily on that academy. Our hero walks through the halls as a powerful lightning bolt strikes. A bit tense, he says it feels like someone in the heavens is preparing his battle, and Alcid says the hero is putting his future on the line. No surprise, the heavens are stirred. Helmut says that Leon arrived on time, and our hero notices that today it's quiet. Then the instructor explains that this was a request from Leon. It seems like he wants to focus on the fight, unlike the other matches that took place here. Alcid says that Brat Elmont wanted to humiliate him in public, while our hero nervously laughs. The man continues and says that since there's no audience, there will only be one observer besides the witness, and our hero asks who's going to watch. Satisfied, the sword says it understood, and our hero asks if Alcid knows who it is. Then he says it's probably Chloe, and that makes our hero even more nervous. Tense, he asks why it would be her. Then Alcid, please, says that Leon doesn't seem to understand what's going on. He says that since the blonde Leon thinks he likes her, he plans to use this fight to push the girl toward him. He explains that there are many cases where a king and his subordinate fight over a woman. Then he remembers Leon saying that if he wins this fight, the boy will become his subordinate. Our hero gets really irritated with that and thinks Leon. Our boy thinks about the one-on-one with Leon, while remembering them sitting under a tree, and also remembers when they made the duel agreement, including the part where if he loses, he becomes his subordinate. So that's a good enough reason for Chloe to be an observer. He's drawing a clear line of who will lead and who will follow. He believes this is a truly meticulous plan that Leon would carry out, and of course, this way of doing things disregards what he or Chloe feel. Our hero suspected this, but now he thinks Leon is really a high-class noble, someone who tries to manipulate the relationships and emotions of others, and that this is a political technique that doesn't treat others as equals. Annoyed, he wonders if this is the path of a noble, and if it is, he's truly disgusted by it. Alcid looks at our boy and sees him clenching his fists. He comments that he's angry, and Liam confirms he is. He adds that he should have never done this, and that he's going to have to teach that fool a lesson. Already in the combat arena, the two boys face each other in front of their judge. Smiling, the blonde Leon says he's late, and with a determined look, our Leon says he's the one who's early. Looking back, he asks where the observer is and comments that he heard he called someone. Smiling, the man says he's in a place they can't see, and that it wouldn't be fair if he made a mistake because he was distracted, because that would just become an excuse as well. Smirking ironically, our hero asks if that's really the case. Excited, he says they should start right now then, but the blonde Leon interrupts and pulls out a small jar, taking a pill from inside. Suddenly, he swallows it. Confused, our hero asks what the hell he just ate. Then he explains that it's a pill that suppresses aura, because even if he said he wouldn't use aura, it could activate automatically, and that would be bad. Leon looks a bit tense about that. The instructor hands a weapon to the boy, who asks if they should begin then. The two opponents face each other ready to fight, and our hero thinks that he's completely serious, which is very different from his usual self. However, when it comes to focus, you won't lose either. Then Helmut gives the signal to start, and the two swords clash in the arena, with noble Leon attacking and our hero defending. He seems a little tense and nervous. Meanwhile, the other boy charges at him. Then he starts unleashing a series of quick strikes, which are also deflected by our hero. Our boy thinks he overestimated his own strength, and that he won't last even 30 seconds if he keeps taking those attacks head-on. Then, without pause, the noble charges at him again with force. Still tense, our hero manages to block it. A bit frightened by the situation, he thinks the boy's sword feels like a whip. He realizes that Leon is on a completely different level compared to Elmont, and beyond that, there's something more. Leon thinks he's already using Roderick's vision, but the noble's image seems blurrier than any other opponent he's faced so far. He realizes he needs to calm down and that the incomplete parts of that image will be compensated by the many times he's fought against him before, while the boy continues his relentless assault. Gilbert, impressed, wonders if that's really a duel between students. Helmut, also impressed, thinks that even though they're not using aura, their level of fencing and combat might even surpass that of knights. Our hero thinks he's strong, truly a monster. While the noble Leon wonders when the boy became that strong, Gilbert keeps observing the fight, impressed by what he's seeing. He thinks he knows how much of a genius his lord is, but didn't expect Leon to keep up with him. The noble keeps attacking our hero non-stop, who believes that the attack is a double feat. There's something more to it. Straining his vision, he realizes he's read the figure, and lunges at the boy at the same time he's being attacked. In the next moment, our boy has a cut in his armor right on the chest plate. But in shock, the noble Leon notices a lock of his own hair flying through the air, cut by his opponent's sword. Our hero gets into position to continue the fight while strands of blonde hair fall across the arena. The boy seems slightly irritated and checks his hair. He regains his breath in the arena, while thinking he had been wondering why Leon's attacks after the first one weren't as powerful. Then, worried, the noble realizes that our hero had intended from the beginning to turn this into a battle of stamina. He observes him controlling his breathing. Then, in the next moment, he smiles while the blonde Leon questions whether he's fallen into his strategy. The two opponents stare each other down in the arena. Leon thinks he must get close to the enemy and drain his stamina, then slowly turn the tide to his side. This is a tactic that doesn't allow the slightest mistake. It's a strategy that has nothing fantastical about it. The noble thinks he can feel a will to win coming from him, and that he needs to break that desire first, because if he can't do that, then he'll never be able to bend him to his will. The boy starts using one of his techniques, while Gilbert at the table is surprised, thinking that he's using fast steps, and that he's using an arcane technique from the Imperial family right there. Our hero, under the pressure of that moment, knows it's a technique that uses the muscles and blood flow to allow the user to go beyond their physical limits. The noble thinks that even though it's not a complete technique since he can't use his aura, he believes even half that power should be enough. Our Leon puts in the effort too and had to raise his perception to the maximum as well. Then his opponent charges at him with a devastating attack, but our hero manages to repel it. The noble thinks it was too shallow and wonders if he actually dodged that. Holding his injured arm, he questions whether that was the quick step technique and if he truly isn't using aura. Elsid whispers in his ear that he didn't use aura. Startled, our hero jumps in surprise. But calming down, he asks if that's serious, and the sword explains that the human body is stronger and faster than he thinks, and that even though there are body-strengthening techniques like quick steps, there are also ones that boost strength and endurance, so he shouldn't try to judge it. But in the next instant, his opponent is already upon him, ready to attack. Annoyed, he shouts, asking how dare he get distracted and why he looks so calm. Sensing the attack, our hero says he could say the same and asks if he's only using arcane swordsmanship now. Leon thinks calm my ass and that he lost his rhythm due to Elsid's sudden interruption. He remembers Elsid saying not to try to judge what can be done using common sense just as he receives a cut on the cheek. And in the next moment, he thinks no, Elsid didn't interrupt him. Then he plants his feet firmly on the ground, while his opponent is focused, but seems tense. Leon realizes it's just 5 or 6 steps until he's out of the ring and that he's been pushing him all this time. At that moment, our hero appears more intimidating. Gilbert, who hasn't stopped being shocked, thinks the atmosphere has shifted, but there shouldn't be a way to break through Leon's level of quick steps. Our boy used to think there was only one way to win, and that was by enduring the attacks. In order to protect the small advantage he had in stamina, he waited for his opponent to get exhausted from using quick steps, since what he had was acceleration. Smirking, he scoffs and says this isn't fun. The noble boy, tense, seems confused, so our hero tries to focus. He thinks the only thing he needs to trust is the strength he's been building up. That noble boy thinks it's the first time Leon seems so massive. Smiling excitedly, he says that's right, and this is who he is, thinking that he'll make him his subordinate no matter what it takes and activates his quick step technique once again. The man thinks that using that ability several times without aura should have already pushed him to his limit. Elsid seems to be enjoying the situation. Determined, the noble Leon thinks that if he's a real hero, then this much is nothing. Our hero recalls many moments they've been through and thinks, Leon, you don't know what the decisive difference between the two of them really is. That the boy who was born with natural talent or himself, who swings his sword every single day. Meanwhile, outside, the storm rages on with violent lightning falling from the sky. Our hero charges forward with determination toward his opponent, who does the same in return. And with a powerful impact, a sword is shattered and sent flying through the air. Only for in the next second, our hero to still be holding his sword intact and the noble Leon in shock to realize that his own sword has been broken to pieces. That broken piece of sword bounces along the arena, and the boy looks at the shattered sword in his hand in disbelief, wondering how that was even possible. Elsid, satisfied, says the boy's hard work has paid off, and so he says yes. He explains that what decided the duel was the tip he picked up from Elmont's rising strike. That was an unconventional sword technique that disrupted the timing of the upper limbs. He says this while recalling the moment in the fight when he defeated the boy. Continuing, he says that the most important part is that the number of swords they've broken was different. Looking at him there on the ground, devastated, he says that because the boy is so talented, his physical body can surpass its limits, but he himself knows the limits of a sword. And he adds that if they had been using real swords, the outcome might have been different. Then, our hero approaches, pointing his sword at his defeated opponent. Smiling, he says, "I won, Leon." Smiling and clapping, Gilbert says it's confirmed and that the victory goes to the boy. And Elsid says that he also realizes something. If Leon had lost, he would have become the noble Leon's subordinate. Then he asks the boy what he requested in case the victory was his. He remembers the boy saying he would ensure whenever he desired as long as it didn't affect his reputation or his family's, and everything else was fair game. Satisfied, he thinks that, come to think of it, there's nothing he truly needs. The boy says that after all, he lost, and since this fight was something he chose, he'll have to accept the consequences. He says a promise is a promise and asks what our hero wants. But Leon just smiles while looking at him. And without caring much, he says he'll tell him later, leaving the noble surprised. Then he explains that he doesn't have anything in mind right now and will let him know once he thinks of something, asking if that's okay. The boy and Gilbert seem a bit incredulous and surprised. But smiling, he says it's fine. Feeling a bit of pain, our hero says he finished the fight without using acceleration, but still feels like he pushed himself too hard since his opponent was Leon. Out of nowhere, a voice says, "Oh, light of healing, please grant rest to the wounded." And Chloe appears using her healing magic on her hero. Excited, Leon says he already feels lighter and that this is exactly what he expected from a rank 4 healing spell, so he thanks her for being the observer. The girl looks a little upset, and crying emotionally, she says she just can't understand him or Leon and asks so what if he lost. Leaving our hero a bit intimidated. Wiping her tears, she says he's gotten so much stronger. Then she asks if he's planning to leave the academy, catching our hero by surprise. And he asks how she found out about that. Chloe says she knows him like the back of her hand and that he's such a fool. Leon looks at peace and happy, but he says he thought she would try to stop him, and irritated, she says she can't believe he dared to say that when he wasn't even planning to listen to her. She says he's always been like that, always pushing past the limits people thought were impossible, and in the end, he always pulled it off. And even though it took a bit longer this time, Leon says he thinks it was pretty fast considering how difficult it was. But Chloe insists he took a long time, way too long. She seems thoughtful while our hero laughs at the situation, and then the two of them start laughing uncontrollably. He says he's fine for now and that she should go beat up Leon for him, while the girl asks if she's not supposed to heal him. He says that stubborn guy might not show it, but he's probably really depressed and shocked. So an attack from his girlfriend he hears would turn this loss into nourishment for his future growth, and with that, he'll leave Leon in her hands. Chloe's left speechless watching her friend walk away, and suddenly she shouts his name, asking what he'll do after leaving the academy. Waving goodbye, he says that for now, it's still a secret. The girl looks a bit surprised at his response, then puts her hands together and seems to pray for a friend. Elsid says he never thought he'd see a mage who doesn't believe in gods praying for someone, and our hero says that she really is a good person. The sword asks if he's finished everything, and the boy confirms that yes, he has. He says he thinks he longed to become someone special, and Elsid questions, someone special? He gave his all desperately in everything he did. He wanted to become someone who wouldn't lose to either of the two. That he wasn't able to overcome barriers like social status or talent, and in the end lost his way in front of those special people, thinking he wasn't good enough. But upon meeting Elsid, many things in his life changed for the better. He freed him from the inferiority complex buried deep in his heart, and allowed him to escape the shadow of those two. But now the time has come to become a hero, and who in this world could be more special than him? Elsid observes the boy and says he's quite a materialistic person. Leon asks if he's a bit disappointed, and the sword says of course not. Because what's wrong with wanting wealth and honors? What's wrong with wanting to be famous? He explains that ambitions are a central part of human life, and having dreams that push them forward. And unless one goes down the wrong path, ambitions are what make humans human, and that's why he chose him. The person who was supposed to become the hero wasn't him, but the other guy, the other Leon. Surprised, our hero asks, what? Elsid reveals that he is the legitimate son of the imperial family Clyde, the sword that will rebuild the corrupted empire once again. And his full name is Leon Callum Gladius von Clyde, and he was designated as the hero from 150 years ago. These new revelations leave Leon in shock. Then he comments that that guy is the perfect protagonist, and thinks that based on what he said, if he was supposed to be the protagonist, he no longer is, wondering if that's true. Leon says right and asks if he didn't say that fight would be a test for him, and Elsid says yes, and that he did well. And there's no rule saying a hero has to be someone chosen by prophecies or oracles. If someone's future is forged by their own strength and willpower, that's also what a hero does, and the other Leon is wrong about that part. Our Leon reflects on this, and Elsid asks if he's feeling guilty for having stolen his opportunity or something like that, but the boy says of course not. It's not like Leon lacks anything compared to himself, so why would he feel guilty for someone born with a silver spoon in his mouth? That's impossible. The sword seems a little surprised by that answer. Then Leon says it's his own fault for losing to someone like him, someone who has nothing while he had everything he needed, leaving Elsid even more surprised. He adds that it was he who was chosen. By the soul of the great Roderick, and the sacred sword chose him. So if that's the case, he's just living up to expectations. Finally, Elsid lets out a satisfied sigh. The next day, our hero requested to leave the academy. His instructor was very sad that he was abandoning the academy to become an adventurer, and said he would write him a letter of recommendation. And that as a bonus, the fight between him and Elmond's clique had inspired both commoners and nobles to work hard, and that had changed the academy. Now finally with that, he probably won't have to return to the academy again. Very excited about the changes, he says, "Let's go to the free city of Blaine, where adventurers gather." A beautiful eagle seems to be watching something. That eagle flies over a green forest and through the blue skies beneath a beautiful clear day. Running like a madman, our hero bursts out from a bush. Stopping to rest and catch his breath, he says he's finally free from that maddening forest, collapsing to his knees in relief from his despair. Excited, he notices he can see the city of Blaine from there, and that he'll finally be able to sleep in a bed after having left the academy 15 days ago. Elsid questions what he means by maddening forest, and says he should be grateful. It became a training ground for him. Sarcastically, he says he's so grateful, he's almost crying to be leaving it. For 15 days, they've been in that forest on their way to Blaine. He camped in a forest for the first time. Goblins attacked him fairly often, and in those less than favorable conditions, Elsid allowed him to use the sacred sword instead of the wooden one, which he had prepared before leaving the academy. Our hero faced and overcame the challenges, and used the 15 days he spent in the forest to get used to wielding the sacred sword and training with it. Elsid says he took a week longer than expected. Leon thanks him for the training and says those goblins had been giving him trouble since the start, and Elsid asks if he managed to defeat 10 of them in under 10 seconds, and that even if he did manage to do that, was all thanks to the footwork training he received. Leon thinks he's definitely stronger than when he entered the forest, and that if it's up to what he wants. He would like to wipe out all the monsters from now on, and the sword comments that he seems very fired up about that, but that he should save that for when the time is right, which makes our hero curious. He explains that the boy is still a jar in the making, and becoming stronger by slaying monsters will fill the jar. No matter how much he tries to fill a jar that isn't finished, it'll end up leaking and his effort will be wasted. Leon says he understands and will remember that. A good while later, nearing the city walls, we see that beautiful city from above. At the entrance gate, our hero passes by 2 guards. He walks through the city among streets and market stalls. Leon says he's glad he managed to get through the gates safely, and that the public seems to have a lot of trust in the Academy student ID. Then Elsid says, by the way, this city. He adds that it's a bandit village, and shocked, our hero asks, "What? This is a bandit village?" The sword says that for about 300 years there have been several cities like this, and that it's not small, but also not exactly big. Compared to the size of the city, it's quite disorganized, and the security in that area isn't great either. A bit tense about the situation, our hero says he still feels pretty inexperienced. Then Elsid asks where he wants to go, if it's an inn, but our hero says no, that he'll first look for a guild, that it would be better to register as soon as possible while they're not in a rush, and Elsid says he's right, that he did say he wanted to become an adventurer, and that a mercenary would work too, but compared to an adventurer, it doesn't seem like he'd have much freedom to move around. He also doesn't intend to get involved in power struggles among nobles, and more importantly, he wants to use the privileges of a hero, believing that taking monster hunting quests would be best, and the sword says it'll still be a long time before its seal is released. Leon thinks that aside from training in the forest, he was able to learn a lot about Elsid, because he descended a year earlier than the Oracle had predicted, and that most of Elsid's authority as a sacred sword is sealed. Normally, the wielder of a sacred sword would have a body that recovers quickly, being nearly immortal and also greatly enhanced, as well as being able to use aura and holy energy. And for someone like him who lacks aura to be able to use a sacred sword at full power, he'll need to become stronger. Meanwhile, in the late afternoon, at an adventurer's guild, a girl thanks him for registering as an adventurer under the name Leon. She says she confirmed his enrollment at the academy as well as the recommendation letter from Helmut, so he'll start at rank D. Leon asks if she's Rise and asks what rank D means. She explains that it determines the kind of jobs he'll be able to take, and that you should be able to rise quickly. She says he'll need to reach rank B to show that he can use an aura weapon, and that it'll take some time to get to A or S, and he can't believe aura is a requirement. Besides the level needed to circulate aura, an aura weapon represents the level at which someone can control their aura outside the body. A sword that can break stones and cut through steel. This is the true beginning of a superhuman. He thinks that reaching that level only gets you to rank B, and wonders how strong a rank A or S must be. Elsid says this organization is more interesting than he expected, and it looks like there are many humanoid races around. At that moment, our hero notices several people staring at him, among them some feline humanoids, and others who look like elves. The sword assesses and says there are werewolves, elves, even high elves, and he can't believe they're working with races that were at war 300 years ago. He says the person who created this organization is very skilled. Smiling kindly, Rise asks what's wrong, and our hero stammers a little, saying it's nothing. Then she says it's all good. She says his registration is complete, and that if he wants to become an official adventurer, he'll need to complete a mission with no reward at all. Our hero can't believe what he just heard. No reward. In other words, a free job. He asks if it's really without any reward, and she says yes, that he needs to be acknowledged by the guild to become an adventurer. And of course, you have to pay a price to gain recognition. Elsid says that's how it is, the world isn't always an easy place, while our hero tells him to shut up. It was a beautiful day in that city, and there we have the entrance to the city's sewers. Inside, we see a series of dark tunnels. Someone is running through those underground waters, and facing various monsters, our hero works on his mission. He says it's the first time he's fought rats using a sword. Elsid says his sword techniques are meant for one-on-one combat, and to get through these guys, they'll have to keep cutting them down. He says there's no better training than cutting all kinds of enemies, whether they're beasts on the ground or in the air. Leon thinks the sword shouldn't be giving that kind of advice. The sword says there's no avoiding it, since he took the mission and went to clean the sewers, and our hero seems a bit annoyed by that. He continues his battle against those creatures, until finally he takes down all of them. But it seems something different catches his attention, and he tells Elsa to look at that guy deep in the nest, asking why he has a horn even though he's a rat man. The sword explains that it's an evolved species, and our hero questions that. It explains that it's a species that lived a long time as monsters or gained a special type by absorbing tons of resources, and that they're like hobgoblins, so Leon asks if he needs to be careful with it. It explains that the horn is proof it possesses a special ability, and the bigger it is, or the more it has, the more dangerous the ability will be. The enraged creature begins concentrating its power at the tip of its horn. Frightened, he asks if there's a way to tell what kind of ability it is, and Elsa says it would be good for him to experience it for himself once, and that unfortunately, that companion's ability is useless, and Leon asks what he's talking about. Then he explains that the ability is a curse. While our hero listens silently, he wields his sacred sword. With a loud roar, the creature invokes an ability, a plague curse, and attacks our hero. The ability strikes his sacred sword and is instantly nullified. Satisfied, our hero says that it didn't work, and that today, that rat ran into the wrong opponent. With an excited look, he orders the creature to hand over its horn. Sometime later at the Adventurers Guild, our hero shows up with a packed bag. The receptionist is startled when he throws the sack on the counter. Shocked by it, she asks if all of that is rabbin tails and says there are 23 kilos of them. He thinks that with a simple calculation it means he hunted a total of 230 ratmen, and says to the girl, that's exactly right. Then he places another bundle on the counter, and when opened, there are some horns inside. He explains that they're ratman horns, and that since he hunted about 200, a few, 3 or 4, had horns, so he asks if she can buy those too. The girl seems a little tense, and Leon calls out to her, and she finally answers, stammering that yes. Placing the total on the counter, she says that comes to 13 silver coins and 50 copper. Our hero says that's way more than he expected, and Rise explains that horns are actually quite expensive and in high demand. She says he's the first to bring in all that on his very first mission, and that she's really impressed with him. A bit shy, he asks if that's it, and she continues, saying she would have already been impressed if he just hunted a single ratman. But to think he took down 4 of the evolved ones means he must be really skilled even though he's so young, and says he's amazing. Our hero is happy, but very shy of the compliment. Finally, she congratulates Mr. Leon and says that from now on, he'll be officially registered as a D-rank adventurer in the guild, and that the seal on this emblem represents the free city of Blaine. Leon asks if he can use that anywhere, and Rise says yes, but adventurers of rank B or lower have secondary priority if they choose to work in other branches. He looks at that emblem, clearly satisfied. She explains that it's a measure to keep people from only accepting requests they like, and our hero says he understands. Looking at that emblem, he thinks that this item is the proof that he's no longer a student of the academy, but an adventurer. Rise tells Mr. Leon that if there's any request he wants to take on, please let her know. She might be able to help even without much authority. Holding his emblem, he smiles with satisfaction, and thinks that in that case, as he walks out in the late afternoon from the Adventurers Guild, Elsid seems to be pleased with something, and says that the receptionist seemed to have mistaken him for a holy knight, and in shock, our hero asks why. He asks if he didn't pick a mission that doesn't pay well and is difficult, and in the past, knights would go on a journey before being knighted with their identity kept secret. But since the hero is a sort of holy knight, she's not entirely wrong, and Leon asks, really? He adds that she'd probably faint in the future if she found out the truth, but Leon says he can't just tell her the truth. The sword says, who would say something like that? A receptionist in charge of the hero? She could become a legend within the Adventurers Guild in a few decades. She could probably live comfortably just by writing and selling autobiographies, and Leon says she's the one who got confused. He didn't lie or anything. He thinks that now that he's giving it more thought, it's not really different from a journey to help others, and that beyond training, he'd be helping someone because of it. The boy says that since he'll be living in Blaine for a while, this is definitely better than living under suspicion. And he tells Elsid that he's thinking of leaving only after reaching rank B. The sword is surprised by that. While Leon asks how long it would take to reach rank B, Elsid immediately answers that 100 days would be enough. And our hero seems a bit surprised by the response. But the sword says he wanted to go easy on him for about 6 months in terms of teaching. But it seems that won't work. And even if this is part of training, he still can't believe his successor is cleaning sewers to rank up. He says it's disgraceful, but our hero thinks at least it brought in a bit of cash and wonders what kind of reasoning that even is. Elsid says he needs to become as strong as possible and defeat at least one dragon. Desperate, our hero asks if the difficulty gap between monsters didn't just jump way too much. But Elsid says that now that he's learned the basics of vision and footwork, he'll raise his proficiency through more real fights. And that one of Hero's privileges is that he can absorb the power of the monsters he defeats. Basically, he accumulates points. Leon wonders if this is the connection between monsters and aura that Elsid told him about, remembering the energy he felt when he defeated those monsters. He thinks he already knew that elixirs and training methods from a prestigious family were truly effective for aura training. Elsid says that honestly, anyone can absorb the power of a monster and convert it into aura. But the nobles and royalty of the past sealed this truth so that only they would know how to do it. Leon thinks that now the main people who seal that knowledge are dead and only Elsid knows the truth, and learning this made him more capable of subduing monsters, and that not even 1,000 rat men would be enough. The sword says that once he becomes familiar with the process, he'll be able to hunt stronger monsters and eventually a dragon. In shock, Leon asks, wait, you weren't joking. Annoyed, Elsid says of course not, and that his sacred sword isn't a cleaning tool, and asks if it makes any sense to use it to clean air and purify things. Our hero remembers that he asked Elsid to purify him after coming out of the sewers. And of course, using his wonderful powers, he left Leon good as new. But it seems he held a bit of a grudge about that. He asked his master why he's so insistent that he hunt dragons. Elsid explains that it's because in the future, they'll need to go to the Titan Mountain range. Terrified, our hero says Titan Mountain. That's a dragon territory he wouldn't dare go near, a land ruled by the laws of giant kings. He asks why they go to the Demon Realm, a place that countless kingdoms failed to conquer in the past. And Elsid says he'll definitely be able to help him. He explains that his body was left in that area and he lost his memories, so he doesn't remember much. And they'll make it their goal to reach that land in 6 months. Leon thinks about that and asks if he wants to go there looking for something he has no idea what it even is, and the sword says everything will be fine. And that it's not like they'll be goofing off until they get there. He just needs to be able to protect his own body. Smiling, he says he should just trust him after all. He's the sacred sword. And our hero smiles, satisfied. He says all right, especially since nothing he's trusted so far has gone wrong, so Elsid says now they'll be in hellish training, and that terrifies our hero. Sometime later at the Adventurers Guild, 2 men are mocking someone, asking if that cat's going to take out the rat men again today. The man wonders if that bastard just called him a cat, calling him an idiot. The other says he heard he's been stacking up a mountain of them every day. Leon thinks maybe it's because he got famous for hunting rat men, but his nickname in the guild became Cat. Arriving at the counter, he throws the full pouch on top. Smiling, Rai says the amount is smaller than usual, and our hero agrees. He says he didn't find many rat men this time, and the ones that attacked him were few. He thinks they're starting to get a bit scared of him. She says that even though rat men seem dumb, they've got a bit of intelligence. Leon says that's why he'd like her to check out other missions. Then she lays a few papers on the table. Excited, she says she knew this day would come, so she handpicked these 4 missions. Our hero and Elsid stand there looking, thinking about which one they might choose. And suddenly something catches his attention. Looking more closely, the documents for those missions seem really old. Elsid says that shows how unpopular the mission is and also means it was never renewed. Smiling, he says that's it, and he's going to take that mission. Sometime later, walking through the city, he comments that it's a hunt for a rocky slime, that its habitat is found in the earth near the wall because they eat rocks. So if they're allowed to live there, the walls won't last for very long. He wonders if the mission is from Blaine's defense captain, and there's certainly no chance that he would take advantage of him. Arriving at a small gate in the wall, our hero shows a paper to the guard, who, startled, asks if it's about subjugating stone slimes and says he never requested that. Leon asks how that's possible since it's an official guild document, but the defense captain says it must be some kind of mistake. Then suddenly someone approaches, asking if he's the guy, the adventurer who cleaned out those sewer rats so well. Leon says that yes, that's him, and the man says he's amazing, and they need more adventurers like him. He says he can't believe those guys who only take easy jobs and still call themselves adventurers. They're ridiculous, and asks Leon if he doesn't think so. A little later, our hero walks through the interior of the city wall, remembering that the man said depending on how good he is, he could give him more rewards, so he has to work hard. A little worried, he comments that the man made it sound like it was something hard to deal with. Elsid asks if it wasn't good that he said he'd give him more rewards, and Leon says the place is damp and slippery, and without technique, it would be hard to stay on his feet there. The sword says that in other words, it's a perfect place for footwork training, but our hero asks him to wait a second. And looking down the corridor, he sees 3 slimes bouncing toward him. Our hero asks if there are 3 of them, and Elsid impatiently tells him to use his vision. He explains that if they were like regular slimes, adventurers wouldn't avoid them, so the boy agrees. And suddenly a stone appears very close to his face, barely giving him time to dodge. That stone, thrown with force, sticks into the wall, and he wonders if it was a rock. Frightened, he asks where it came from, and Elsid tells him to look in front of him. Then a slime comes at him. Defending almost instinctively, he blocks that slime with his sword, but feels his weapon being pushed back. Surprised, he wonders if that's why they're called rocky slimes. Elsid says the boy probably already knows, but the slime's weakness is its core, and that if he destroys that core, which is right at its center, he'll be able to destroy the slime entirely, no matter what type of ability it has. But there's more to it. Our hero realizes it has countless stone fragments within it, multiple layers of armor protecting the core for a monster that was definitely well designed. Elsid says it's no wonder adventurers want to avoid them. Blunt weapons would work well at penetrating a slime's defense, whereas swords and bows could easily cut or pierce them, but they use stone fragments to compensate for their weaknesses. That's why it's a monster that has become difficult to deal with using weapons. Suddenly, the slimes begin spitting a barrage of rocks at our hero. That barrage of stones begins to close in on Leon, and he defends himself with his sacred sword. Then those slimes continue advancing toward him. Our hero seems to be struggling a bit in this fight. Elsid says they know he can't block everything, so they're aiming for vital spots. He asks Leon what his analysis is of the attack just now. The boy says they're firing stone fragments from over 5 meters away, which gives a window of time before they shoot again. He thinks that if he closes that distance between them, he might be able to get in 1 or 2 attacks right now, but there's a problem. Since he can't get through the slime's defense, he needs to find a way to avoid the fragments and strike the core. And he wonders, no, I need to cut it. Elsid looks surprised while he thinks that using his vision, he could look for the moment when the fragments are dispersed throughout the body, then use the sacred sword to pierce the empty space. But the problem is that the rock fragments are constantly moving, so finding the gap won't be easy. Despite the situation, our hero smiles. and asks if a crisis can also be an opportunity. El Cid says that at the moment the rock slime creates an opening to launch its stones, the flow of its mucus must also stop for an instant. So based on his abilities, there's no better time to precisely destroy the core. Leon asks if he thought all of that through when choosing the stone slime, and the sword says of course. Determined, our hero says then all right, and that he'll give it a shot. Then wielding his sacred weapon, he charges at the creatures. Getting closer, he activates his trained vision, and in a single strike, he slices through one of the creatures, shattering his core completely. He realizes that if he misses the timing even for a moment, he himself will get hit. El Cid says that since they detect what's around them through vibrations, he needs to reduce surface pressure while moving. The slimes keep attacking and hurling rocks at our boy. The sword says that this is definitely doable with his footwork technique, and as he approaches, our hero keeps dodging the monster's attacks. Excited, he thinks he can pull this off, and just like El Cid said, it's possible if he uses his movement technique. But something unexpected happens, and our hero slips while thinking, what? Looking to the side, he sees that mass of rocks flying toward him. Then he focuses and begins using his skills. With effort, he gets back on his feet, just in time to dodge the barrage of rocks speeding past him. And with his trained vision, he clearly sees the core of another creature, shattering it without mercy. A short time later, slime remains cover the entire corridor. The sword says he doubts he did that consciously, but in the end, it all worked out, and Leon asks what he's suddenly talking about. El Cid says it's about what he just did. It was level 2 of the footwork technique, and our hero, surprise, says what? He explains that finding balance on flat ground and reducing vibrations are the basics of level 2, and if there are other elements on the floor, he must know how to use them too. Whether it's a frozen floor or boiling surface, being able to use the environment as part of his power is the main point of the movement technique. And that means becoming adaptable enough to turn a disadvantageous environment into a convenient one for him. So even if it was just luck, he shifted into a stance where he spread his legs to lower his center of gravity, and asks if that wasn't the case. By doing that, he abandoned his upright stance and was able to flexibly shift in any direction he wanted. He says that if his environment changes, then his posture must change too. And up until now, the posture and movements he was using were suited only for flat terrain. In a place with a low ceiling and a wet floor, he'll need to move in a way suited for that kind of place. Leon says a lower stance definitely allows for more comfortable movement, and El Cid asks if his training isn't going better with actual practice. Then our hero says he's a demonic sword, and El Cid, incredulous, asks, what the hell? Leon thinks this is only level 2, and he can't believe this is the beginner standard. The sword says that now that he thinks about it, he shouldn't be dodging the attacks even if he's gotten a bit more used to the footwork technique, and that surprises our hero. El Cid asks if he'll die from getting hit by just a pebble, and that it's better to practice taking less damage so he can use it in a real battle. He explains that he'll need to use his body to take the hits he's been trying his hardest to block and failing, and that he shouldn't just rely on bursts. If he finds the perfect timing, he'll be able to slice through them, and he can't use bursts if there are 2 or fewer of them. Annoyed, Leon tells this demonic sword to just go ahead and ask him to die already, and it replies that it's all for his own good. If he gets too comfortable in battle now, it'll be harder later. Leon says he's not even comfortable yet, so why is he asking for all this? And the sword says that by his standards, Leon is already comfortable, and adds that in his day. Some people observe the entrance to the inner part of the city walls. The guard says it's the 3rd week now, and asks what time you went in. The other replies that it was before 10 in the morning, before the second shift change, and the first man says that he really works hard even though he's so young. He says that at first it seemed like he wouldn't be able to defeat the stone slimes, but nowadays he comes up with a full sack, though the rewards aren't even that good. Suddenly, some people who are awaiting their point and say he came out. Our hero comes walking from inside, with a serious look while carrying 2 bags of slime, and that leaves people quite impressed and surprised. Leon says that today is the last day, while the soldier smiles awkwardly. He says he cleared the areas near the wall, and since slimes reproduce very slowly, they won't have to worry about them anytime soon. Pointing to the bags, he says those are the last fragments of rocky slimes, and asks them to please notify the guild that the mission is complete. The soldiers glance at each other, looking at that bag full of slime fragments. As he walks, our hero asks if that means he's ready, and El Cid says yes, and that using the power they accumulated in subjugating the stone slimes, he'll now need to take his first step, learning about aura. Sometime later in an inn, El Cid comments that it was faster than expected. He says he first expected him to absorb a decent amount of power since slimes are mana-based organisms, and that he thinks thanks to the fact that no one had accepted that mission for so long, it turned out great because it sped up the training, and now he can start learning about aura. El Cid says that Leon is pretty late to start learning aura compared to others, and asks if he's ready. Our hero, full of determination, says of course. Descendants from noble families like Leon received a baptism where their circulatory systems were opened at birth, and they gained mana through elixirs. The reason social status also affects the difference in abilities is that developing aura without a baptism was nearly impossible for him in the past. The sword says there's one more thing. If someone who used baptism tries to unblock a circulatory system clogged by impurities, they might not be able to handle it, end up dying, and that information scares our hero. But El Cid says he's been absorbing mana all this time, and more importantly, Leon has him the sacred sword. The power of the sword will protect his circulatory system and heal his wounds at the same time, but it's going to hurt like hell, and he'll have to endure it. He explains that if he loses consciousness, the baptism will fail, and that whether he succeeds or not will depend on his inner strength. Then El Cid begins using his power in front of our hero. He watches those lights concerned, when suddenly they become swords of light. Then suddenly one of them descends from the sky and enters Leon's back. He screams in pain as he coughs up blood. While he suffers there, sitting with a sword in his back. Several other swords made of light begin to move toward him. Finally, all of them strike him at the same time. Leon struggles hard to endure it, but his suffering is clearly visible. Elcid, surprised as he watches our hero enduring it, says to think you'd be able to withstand 10 swords of light. The boy remains there on the ground doing his best to hold on, though clearly badly injured. The sword looks out the window, thinking that as Leon's aura awakens, it seems that the presence of people who had been hiding in this city is becoming much clearer. Sometime later, already at night in the inn, our hero says, "This is," and finishes, saying, "Aura." He thinks he can feel the flow circulating outside his body, and he observes all that refined energy circulating in his heart. It feels like he received another package containing power that's different from his physical abilities, and he feels like he can do anything now. But Elcid says he's mistaken, and our hero doesn't quite understand. King Roderick, the hero, says he truly is amazing, and even considering that awakening is based on inner strength, he still exceeded his expectations. He gets a little thoughtful and asks why he looks so sad, and says he said the hero's training was something he'd be in charge of, and in the end, everything worked out, asking if the stronger the hero is, the better for him, right? The problem is how he's doing both things. He even used a shortcut to place him in the sacred sword, asking if that wasn't the case and whether he knows that he is King Roderick. He adds that Leon is his successor, so how about keeping the rest of his options with him, and to make sure he watches everything that's happening from the heavens? Pointing his finger at Leon, Elcid says there's something else. He then says he believed Leon would be able to handle at most 5 swords. He explains that he used the baptism to unclog the wide vein, and to use aura properly, he'll need to unclog the small vein, that he's just a child overflowing with a bit of power, that he still has a long road ahead, and our hero, scratching his head, says he knows that, but still he thinks. Even though there's no change in his physical abilities yet, he can feel the energy. Elcid explains that it's the aura sense, and if he focuses on using that flow, he'll be able to analyze his surroundings. Our hero's eyes light up when he hears that, and he thinks it's way too cool. The sword says it knows he's happy now that he has aura, but first it needs to explain aura to him, and asks if he knows that aura has attributes. That there are 5 common attributes usually found in humans: metal, beast, wood, fire, and water. But what he has isn't one of those. He says he's a bit surprised that Leon obtained the same aura as his, which makes our hero curious. Surprised, he asks if it's the same as his, so that means, and Elcid interrupts and says yes. That his aura is of the sun attribute, which represents light and heat. This is a high-class attribute that represents splendor. Leon, overjoyed, celebrates on the bed, thinking he has the same attribute as the legendary hero. Elcid says he'll summarize before getting to the main topic. With a snap of his fingers, he opens that information terminal. There it shows that he's a hero who has finally learned aura. He's level 22 with a growing list of skills. He's surprised, thinking it looks really different from before, and not only that, but wonders how he just learned aura and is already level 3. Elcid says he was able to use accelerate even before learning how to use aura, and that he can even use aura sense, recalling earlier moments when he used that power like that. He adds that he's already well above levels 1 and 2, and our hero asks if that's really true. Elcid says his martial body also advanced to level 2 after his meridians were opened, and now he'd like to teach him some of the swordsmanship that's been missing, and that makes Leon really happy. Celebrating, he thinks he can finally learn the swordsmanship of the great hero Roderick. With shining eyes, he asks if they should start right away, and Elcid says, "Heavens, you're really fired up, huh?" And adds that it's 100 times better than having no motivation, at least in his opinion, but there's something he needs to know first. That this city is where his enemies live. Leon doesn't seem to understand and asks, "What?" He explains that somewhere in this city he can feel their presence, that they're the arch enemies of the hero, the traitors trying to fulfill a purpose by handing this world over to beings from other worlds. They are insects constantly writhing in the shadow of the hero of their respective era. A bit tense, Leon asks what their name is, and Elcid says he doesn't waste names on those pieces of shit, and if he needs a name for them, he can call them Malice, a wicked group. Irritated, clenching his fists, Leon thinks, enemies of the hero. But the sword says there's no way he can face them head-on right now. Our hero reaches a conclusion and says, then, finishing the thought by saying he just needs to get stronger, and asks if that's right, and that he's already decided to become a hero. Elcid stares at our hero. He explains that for now, they'll probably remain quiet, but it's not like he has all the time in the world. They'll need to act within 2 months at most. He says subjugating monsters is nothing more than preparation to become stronger, but Malice is an enemy a hero can't avoid. From now on, he'll have to throw himself into the mud, crawling through blood and animosity. Our hero hears all that, looking a bit tense. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Rise tells our hero that the guards contacted her, but she was worried because he hadn't shown up for 4 days straight, and Leon asks if he made the girl wait. She looks at him and says there's something different about him. Leon says he kind of had an epiphany while subjugating monsters. Very excited, she says she knew it and that she has one more reason to congratulate him. With that, our hero looks a bit confused and says pardon, and asks the girl, "Did you say one more?" Smiling gently, she hands him another emblem and says yes, congratulating him on being promoted to rank C, Sir Leon. Our hero looks at that beautiful emblem in his hand and asks if C ranks usually don't need a separate evaluation for promotion, and Rise confirms that's right. But considering the subjugation of the Ratman and the Rocky Slimes, he received very high evaluations, so he didn't need one thanks to the letter of appreciation from the Lord and the Captain. Leon looks proudly at the emblem and thinks he got promoted after completing only 2 requests. Elcid tells him that's not bad at all, and if he can pick up more requests thanks to this promotion, it'll be easier to search for Malice. The boy then says he can start with the C rank requests, and Rise confirms he can start right away, showing him some papers. Rise thinks he's already looking for new requests right after being promoted, and that Holy Knights really are on another level. And Elsid thinks that's probably how the girl is interpreting it, and holy power really is quite similar to Sun Aura after all. Liam asks what he thinks of it, and the sword says there seem to be some decent ones, but nothing related to malice. So he asks if they should focus on training until they find some clue, while the girl watches him talking to himself. She asks if he wants her to show him requests from a different category, since just picking rejected requests seems a bit, but our hero interrupts and says that's not it. He thinks silently for a few seconds, and asks her to show him requests related to the slums or ones with a bad reputation. The girl seems a bit tense and asks, the slums. Slums are usually places where the poor gather, but the slums in Blaine are different. They have thieves, informants, fugitive convicts, smugglers, assassins, and that kind of people. It's an area occupied by lawbreakers. Leon thinks that if it's a lawless zone formed on a large scale, with characteristics of a free city, then Rise in the next moment says there aren't any requests related to the slums. And that's because it's mercenary work, not adventurer work, she says it a bit nervously. Our hero thinks, damn it, adventurers don't get involved in human conflicts. Disturbances in the slums are mostly disputes between people. He thinks he can't become a mercenary full of restrictions after coming this far, and that if he starts investigating without a reason, they'll definitely keep an eye on him. Eventually, Rise shows a paper and asks what he thinks of that request, Sir Leon. Our hero picks it up and looks at it for a moment. It's a subjugation of ghost armors in an abandoned mansion. Ornamental armors that were left behind in a deserted mansion turned into living armors, making the property unsellable. Rise says that not only is the reward low, but there also aren't many D ranks who can destroy the armors. Our hero thinks his sacred sword shouldn't have any trouble with that. She comments that since the mansion is close to the slums, she's sure it'll be helpful for going near that area. Leon thinks that having an excuse really is crucial, and no matter how powerful the forces in the slums might be, they won't dare pick a fight with the Adventurers Guild, since they might have to deal with a high-rank adventurer if they mess with the guild the wrong way. A rank and above are forces under national control. Rise gently smiles at our hero, while he scratches his head, a bit embarrassed. Smiling, he says thanks to the girl, and it'll definitely repay her next time, and she says he doesn't need to worry since it's her job. The girl tells Sir Leon to also pick up the reward for the rocky slimes, and that the guard captain added a generous bonus for him. Our hero looks at the sack of coins, very satisfied, when he suddenly realizes something, and asks the girl if he can request one more thing. She says yes, he can ask. With a more serious expression, he asks if she could tell him where the Church of Blaine is located. But Rise looks somewhat terrified by the question, and stammering, asks if he means the church. Then the boy says yes, that he has business to take care of there. Rise gets very tense at the request. Leon thinks he knew she'd react that way, because if she believes he's the Holy Knight as Elsid says, then even though Holy Knights and their penance aren't allowed to request help from the church, there are exceptions if enemies of the church appear. In other words, heretics, those who denounce the goddess. Regardless of affiliation or faction, the church gathers all its strength to fight them. That's the reason the ruthless Iron Knights are dispatched. Then the girl says it's at the end of the Prima District in the northeast, and that it's the 13th building. Our hero thanks her and says he's on his way. The girl stays there staring, almost drooling. The next moment, she realizes that if a sacred knight is looking for the church, it must mean an enemy of the church has appeared. Falling flat on the ground, she thinks this is something the guild can't ignore, and that she needs to report it immediately. With a satisfied look, Elsid says, how cunning. He says it's the most effective method considering he won't reveal his identity, and that a rank D or C report isn't enough to make the guild take action. Leon says that's not entirely true and asks if he really didn't reveal his identity, since once the report is made, the guild will act on its own. He thinks he could show Elsid to the church if it truly became necessary, but he'll leave that as a last resort. And Elsid's seal hasn't been fully released yet, plus he still has to improve his skills before proclaiming himself the wielder of the sacred sword before the church. But setting that aside, Leon asks about the living armors and whether they're monsters consisting of suits of armor walking around. A bit surprised, the sword says no, which surprises our hero too. He explains that living armors are a rare natural phenomenon, and that those armors can move using magic or sorcery, or if someone imbues power into them. He says they have no ego and are nothing more than pieces of metal with instructions inside to repel intruders. Leon asks if then a dispel spell from a mage wouldn't solve everything. Elsid explains that they weren't created using magic, so that wouldn't work. Because the principle of dispelling is like dismantling a building by removing its pillars. That doesn't undo the whole pile itself. So that's why a mage is useless in this kind of situation. Our hero thinks and says, well, the ones we have to face aren't a big deal. He looks at a schematic on the paper and says their armor set is made from a mix of iron coated with silver. The sword asks why he thinks they haven't been defeated yet if they're easy to deal with. He explains that this would have been resolved long ago if it had been assigned as a disciplinary mission, and that makes our hero uneasy. But the next moment he seems to find something on that paper, and asks if the regeneration speed of the armors is abnormally fast. Even after destroying each part of the armor, it reassembles in under 10 minutes. As a result, their weapons can't last through it, so they retreat or something like that according to the document. Alcid says he understands and that this is how strong a living armor made from iron alloy can be. Rolling up the document, our hero says they'll find out once they get there and says, let's go. Night falls on the city and they arrive in the slum region. He's surprised by what he sees because it's far more crowded than he expected, and it definitely is. Then he calls for Alcid, who answers and says he's been feeling something uncomfortable since entering the area, asking if someone is following him. But the sword says it would have told him right away if someone was, but that it has a hunch about what it could be. Curious, our hero asks what it is. He explains that it's because of his aura sense. The sun aura is more sensitive to external influences, and people are eyeing him because they think he's an easy target due to his age, so their ill intentions are triggering his aura. Shrinking back, Leon says he feels even more uncomfortable now that he knows that. He says he can't believe that stabbing sensation comes from people wanting to hurt him, and Alcid says that even so, he should be careful. That most ill intentions are insignificant, but some are quite dangerous, so our hero says he's got it. The sword says that no matter where they are, humans are forced to be cautious around strangers and that he should be careful while carrying out this request. A little worried, our hero continues on his path. A beautiful moon can be seen in the sky when our hero reaches his destination. Looking at that enormous and terrifying mansion, that building looks like it's been abandoned for quite some time. And Alcid says this place wouldn't sell even if there were no armors inside, and our hero agrees with that. Around the area are some armors covered by a thin cloth, which at that very moment awaken from their slumber. Leon continues moving through the mansion and arrives at a large room full of cobwebs. Drawing his sacred sword, he says he thinks he's ready. Then he moves forward using his magical weapon to light the way. Excited, he says having it is so convenient, and Alcid tells him to bring candles next time because he can't do this when there are others around. And our hero, excited, says, okay, next time. Then the sword points straight ahead. From the end of the corridor, we see an armed suit of armor approaching. Its eyes glow with some kind of sorcery. A weapon strikes and cracks the floor, and from the hallway, the armor stares at the intruders. Our hero, excited, says it's the first time he's facing an opponent with a halberd, that it can be swung to slash, thrust to pierce, and even used to crush. And that's not all. It has a reach of about 2 meters. So that weapon alone can cover the distance he'd need 2 steps to reach. That armor prepares to strike the boy, as he defends and thinks that, however, that advantage only applies when there's someone to wield the weapon. With a precise move, our hero strikes that weapon. He thinks that no matter how powerful that halberd is, there's no way a 20 to 30 kilogram empty suit of armor can overpower him with it. Determined, he says that's the price it pays for closing the distance on its own. The next strike begins to break the armor apart, but Leon realizes that it's far from enough. Then, in the next moment, he unleashes a series of attacks on the enchanted armor. Its shattered pieces scatter across the floor. Alcid asks if he used acceleration and says that aside from the minor blade deflections due to the speed boost, it wasn't bad. But Leon says he can barely use it for a few seconds, though now with aura he can use it much more naturally. Still, either way, the report said they regenerate even if destroyed with a war hammer. Our hero stands there observing the shattered armor on the floor and asks if the report didn't say abnormal regeneration, and that this doesn't seem like it. Alcid says they might have made a false report. Leon says that's possible, but a false report is a Class 2 crime in the guild. And if someone died because of a false report, the guild would put a bounty on the one who submitted it. He thinks something about this is bothering him, who would take such a risk just to avoid a disciplinary mission. He thinks that now that he's reflecting on it, something seems strange from the beginning. No matter how tough the armors are, a group could handle him without issue. Alcid says he can't think of anything and asks if there might be differences between each one. And our hero says it could be. And then he thinks he should be a bit more cautious, but the sword says it doesn't seem necessary, because they came to him. Looking to the end of the corridor, our hero sees several eyes appearing, and a bunch of animated armors start walking toward him. He looks at what's coming, and says he can't see them clearly, so asks if he can increase the brightness. Alcid says he's not sure if he's a sacred sword or a torch anymore, but he greatly increases the brightness of the magical sword. It seems that holy light illuminates the entire room. Our hero thinks it's amazing, blindingly bright, but not too much for his eyes. It's a comfortable light for him. Suddenly, loud screaming comes from ahead, and the armors begin shouting and covering their eyes with their hands. Not understanding anything, our hero says, "What the hell is wrong with them?" The armor looks at him with smoke coming out of its eyes, and suddenly they charge and attack Leon. Our hero quickly reacts and counters the attacks from his enemies. He thinks these bastards are attacking together, and that although their attacks are easy to read, their movements are flawless. But he thinks there's more to it. This would only be a problem if they were real knights, asking how long they think these repetitive movements will work on him. Alcid calls out to our hero, who suddenly realizes something. Distracted, an attack almost hits his head. He ducks just in time to dodge it. He jumps back and distances himself from his enemy. Annoyed, he asks what it is Alcid, who says that those things aren't living armors, and Leon, irritated, asks what they are then. He tells him to use his vision, because with his eyes, he'll be able to see what they are. Our hero activates his special vision, and he realizes it's as if there's something inside the armors. He asks why there's smoke, and Alcid explains that the black smoke is a kind of evil energy, so it will devour his vitality the moment it touches his body. He says Leon's solar aura will be able to resist it, but nothing good will come from touching them. Leon asks if that's why they reacted to the light of the sacred sword, and Alcid says it's sort of. That if they were just made of evil energy, it would have simply been purified, and that living armors don't have intelligence and couldn't scream. There's absolutely no reason for them to tremble before the light of a sacred sword, and the only beings that show aversion to purification light air. And he finishes by saying they're evil spirits. He explains that these are phantom armors, and they are born when a restless spirit possesses armor, their foolishness degenerating into hatred toward the living. Recalling what he fought earlier, Leon thinks that's why the one he cut down couldn't regenerate. Armors controlled by evil spirits can't be destroyed until their hatred is exhausted. No matter what you do, they keep getting back up. And the only ways to subjugate phantom armors are to expel the spirit with powerful magic, sever their connection, or purify them with holy power. Thankfully, Leon thinks he has the sacred sword, the greatest of the sacred weapons. But there's a catch. There are too many of them, and if they're phantom armors, then it's better for him to retreat for now and return during the day. Elcid says the numbers are strange. There's no way so many of them showed up by coincidence, and Leon asks if it's not a coincidence. He explains that the creation of phantom armors has a very low success rate, even if the enchantment is good, so whether by coincidence or artificial means. Having this number appear here after so many failures means that hundreds or even thousands of spirits flowed into this mansion. Shocked, our hero says that's impossible. There's no way that many people are dying in this city. Elcid explains that the activity level of an evil spirit isn't that high, so they can't go far or stay in this world for too long. And they couldn't even travel to another district within the same city. Leon then says that there's no other place except the slums, that it's a place far from the law, the only place that meets the conditions is the slums, where anything can be obtained with money or violence. Determined, Leon thinks he can't let this slide, but he doesn't have much experience as a hero, and this is something he can't handle yet. And even his last resort to get the church to act using the sacred sword is useless if he doesn't discover the objective and identity of the secret organization. So he decides they'll remove the option of returning in the morning and advances against the armors. He thinks that fighting right now against stronger opponents in a dark environment will become a foundation for his growth. Our hero continues fighting and cutting down the evil armors. Sometime later, he has shattered a bunch of them without difficulty. From the window, it looks like the day is beginning to dawn. Elcid says it seems they've been finished off, and our hero agrees, as the sunlight already enters through the window. He says that intentionally fighting while surrounded isn't so bad after all. The sword asks if it's because of his blind spots, and he confirms. He says his perception is nearly unbeatable, but there's a limit to the field of vision, and no matter where he looks, he can't see behind his head. So it's not like he can fight with his back to a wall all the time either. And Elcid says that's definitely true. And that a third-rate person is controlled by conditions, a second-rate adapts to them, and a first-rate uses the conditions to their advantage. Leon takes a deep breath, satisfied, and leaving the mansion, he says, well, it's something I need to overcome if I'm going to fight for the slums. The danger level of the slums is higher than those spikes, and there are traps set with malicious intent. Leon thinks he's sure that those who are used to killing and setting ambushes will target his blind spots, that if he keeps relying only on his vision, he might end up falling into a trap he can't escape from. On a beautiful day, a child was crying somewhere in the city. It seems something made that little boy upset. A man in a cloak approaches him, and wiping his tears, the boy looks to see who it is. In the next second, he covers his mouth with both hands, frightened. A large, mean-looking man appears near him. Everyone around becomes tense at the man's presence. And as he walks followed by his henchmen, someone says it's Khan, and that he's the boss of the damned most powerful gang in Blaine. Someone says they observed districts 23 and 25 as ordered, but didn't see any slave who entered the area come back. The man says the people around the mansion were dangerous, so they didn't get any closer than they already were, but he asks if they should try to find out more. But the boss says no, they should just observe from a distance, as they drew unnecessary attention by getting close. Then, sitting on a kind of throne, he calls for the next person, and they say they were inspecting the leaking water in districts 23 and 25. Among the waste, they found mixed human remains, and there were so many that they presume at least 30 people were eliminated that day. Khan asks what the mage said, and his henchman says he mentioned something strange, that apparently not even a black magic ritual could do something like that. The boss seems a bit worried about the situation. He orders them to gather everything he asked to be inspected and write a report, attaching the evidence so the church and the guild are forced to act. Agitated, the man says that even if they don't know what's going on, the commission they'll get from the slave merchants will be cut in half if it gets resolved now. Out of nowhere, a splash of red liquid hits the other man's face, and the one who was complaining about the commission collapses, lifeless. Khan says a man dies if he doesn't know when to back off, just like that bastard. The henchman thinks he has an incredible technique, that he couldn't even see anything. It was like he just waved his arm. He says those bastards are different. You can't use them, and you shouldn't try, because even forming a relationship with them is already harmful. And regardless of whether they're lunatics, part of a cult, or even spies from another kingdom, there is absolutely no reason to associate with them. The boss says everything will be over for them if the church decides to act directly, because they will be hunted to the ends of the earth if they exchange coins with that group. And that group is the execution squad of the church, the Holy Knights of the Iron Chain. Khan then says to drop the subject and asks if there's any news, and the man says yes. It's about the abandoned mansion in that district. He heard rumors that an adventurer frequently visits the place due to a request. Khan seems interested, and the man adds that it's been over a week. He continues saying that the adventurer has recently earned a nickname for missions involving rat men and stone slimes. That at first it was Cat, and these days he's being called Janitor. The henchman says he believes it's because he's taking on requests that others reject. Khan says that guy is interesting and adds, a janitor. Huh. He says an adventurer who takes on shitty requests might be the kind of person he could actually use. Night falls in that bustling city, and at the inn where he rests, our hero doesn't seem to actually be resting. He's clearly putting effort into what he's doing, until he finally finishes, looking quite exhausted from the process. Elsa asks how it went, if he managed to feel the movement of the aura flowing through his body, and Leon says yes, that it felt so mystical. He adds that an honest, average man is better than a sloppy genius, saying he's impressed that Leon is keeping up with the training. Leon says it's like he dies and comes back to life every time he overcomes a trial, but he doesn't feel like he's grown, just relieved. Elsa tells him to see for himself then, and with a snap of his fingers, he opens the terminal again. Liam questions why, aside from intermediate level sword mastery, his aura user level is low, and asks if it wasn't at the beginner level before. The sword says that's how fast his growth rate is and that it's to be expected, since it's Elsa who's teaching him. He explains that Leon is learning things that take other people hundreds of days to master, and our hero asks, but the 7-star sword isn't here. Annoyed, Elsa says there's no way he can claim to have learned a sword style if he can't even understand the first technique, and that he should be aware of that. The 7-star sword, also known as chariot, is the arcane sword style invented by Roderick in his era. It's said that one can only truly be called a master when they can use all 7 forms of the arcane sword style consecutively. Our hero says he wants to learn at least one of those forms before facing Malice, and asks if by combining the 2 swords he wouldn't gain an advantage over anyone. But the sword explains that they would die if they weren't master rank, and Leon says that's enough. He says that since it's impossible to become strong enough in 2 months to defeat anyone in the slums, he needs a trump card, and there's no point in using an aura weapon if you can't use it well. Elcid seems to be evaluating the situation. While he continues saying start right now, and that he'll train to his limit, the sword says it's happy with his enthusiasm, but adds that today's training ends here, and our hero, a bit disappointed, asks why. Then he says it's because there are some unwanted guests while looking out the window. Liam questions these unwanted guests and goes to look too, then Elcid says they're definitely not tenants. Our hero asks if they came because of him, but Elcid says he doesn't sense monsters or malice and doesn't feel anyone skilled among them either, but by appearance, they look like thugs. Leon asks if they could be from the slums, and the sword says they don't have a very friendly expression, but he doesn't think they're here to fight. Our hero says he should go meet them and heads outside the inn. Somewhat impolite, one of them asks if he's the janitor, and Leon confirms that. The other apologizes for coming unannounced, but since they're under superior orders, he asks for the hero's understanding, and Leon questions, superiors? The bandaged man says yes, they're members of a gang called Bastard, and our hero watches the group strike poses, looking like a boy band. He thinks he heard about them while gathering information, led by Khan, the Fang, the one on top of the groups dividing the slums into 3. Pointing at our hero, he says the boss is looking for him, and that they were ordered to leave him alone if he doesn't want to go. But the guy suggests that he go obediently, so without further delay, our guy says to show him the way. The goons are surprised by Leon's willingness, while he thinks the boss wouldn't summon him like that if he wanted to harm him. And if he mentions Khan's name, most people will get out of his way, and that this is his chance to reach the depths of the slums. Elcid appears and says it's obvious what he's planning to do, and our hero confirms that. It was a clear night with a big moon in the sky. He thinks the man probably intends to give him a job, the kind that can't be requested from the guild, while he follows the group. He decides that if the man plans to use him, he'll use the man too. Already inside an establishment, the man points to a direction saying, this way, when suddenly someone runs by and bumps into the goon. The man falls to the ground with a bunch of apples scattering all over the place. He stammers, saying he's very sorry. The goon looks at him angrily, calling him a bastard. Then he starts kicking the guy, calling him a shitbug, and asking why the hell he doesn't watch where he's going. Our hero gets uncomfortable with the situation, but Elcid tells him to endure it. Leon, outraged, asks, what? The sword tells him to be more careful with his emotions. If he shows a thirst for hatred in front of Khan, he'll end up achieving nothing. Leon understands the situation and calms down. A few seconds later, he says he's fine now and that he'll be more careful. That night, already at the meeting place, Leon says so that's the base of the bastards, and sarcastically, Elcid says they do know what cleanliness means. He observes the place carefully and wonders if all those are battle marks. He comments that it looks like they don't clean on purpose, and the sword says it's a classic way to show dominance. Suddenly, a huge man appears behind our hero and asks if he's the one they call the janitor. Instinctively, our hero draws his weapon immediately and turns to attack the guy who defends with his wrist. The man gives a wicked smile while holding the hero's sword. Seeming to enjoy the moment, he says janitor is an unfitting nickname. Our hero seems a little intimidated by the man. Then the big guy prepares an attack against our hero, who's in shock just watching, thinking he's going to die. The man unleashes a powerful strike against Leon, but stops the punch right near our hero's face, and even without hitting him, the blow still injures Leon's face. The smoke caused by the strike begins to dissipate. Standing there, he thinks he couldn't dodge it, that it was too much power just from the wind pressure. If he'd kept going, his head would have exploded. He wonders if that's what they call prey, and the man says he's got guts. He thought he'd just be a piece of crap, since he heard he was only a rank C. He adds that that's enough, gives him a light tap on the chest, and says, that's it, I've chosen you. Wiping his nose, our hero asks what he chose him for, and Khan says it's for his request, asking if he hadn't suspected, since he came all the way there. He says he'll give him what he wants, and our hero asks what I want, and what would that be? Smiling, Khan says he's sorry, but he already did his research on him. The man says that at the Royal Academy he was always second place in the class of commoners, and that he kicked the asses of those immature nobles through sheer effort, and after dropping out, he registered with the Adventurers Guild, eventually becoming known to the city's big shots. Leon watches him, thinking he's the king of the slums, Khan, the prey, wondering if he even has informants in the alleys on his side. Proudly, Khan says he kind of gets why he left the academy. It's because he had no intention of becoming a knight that he didn't plan on bowing to the nobles. Elsid and Leon seem a bit surprised by the guy's thinking. He explains that since that was the case, he beat the crap out of those noble bastards and became an adventurer. Different from those bastards who only chase profit. He saw the whole picture and stepped up as an adventurer who could be useful to the big players. He says that's why he managed to rise to rank C after completing only 2 requests. Liam remembers the battles with the rat men, then the slimes, and finally receiving the emblem, while Khan asks, wasn't that it? In shock, the two of them just keep listening while our hero thinks to himself, that's not what happened at all. Khan says that if he were after money, he wouldn't do any of that, and that he had only one goal from the beginning. So he figured it out immediately. Excited, he says it's fame, the thing nobles can influence, the thing that raises your status regardless of your background. He says he's sure that's the reason he didn't hesitate to answer his call, even though it was in the dangerous slums, and asks if that isn't it as well. Very excited about the situation, he says that if the boy accepts his request, his wish will become reality. A bit serious now, our hero says he understands, while thinking what the hell is wrong with this guy and that he's getting everything wrong on his own. Elsid says it's a load of wild nonsense, but it makes sense, considering his past and the missions he took on. Anyone would think he's chasing fame. Leon thinks he's misunderstanding in a completely different way than Rise, but that there's no reason to correct him, because this guy might become his enemy someday, so if he's understanding everything wrong, all Leo needs to do is make use of that, so he says he'll at least hear what the guy has to say. Khan gives him an intimidating look. The meeting continues on that beautiful night. The boss explains that people in the slums are cautious of outsiders, but they don't reject them. He says this place works for the survival of the fittest method, and that a lot of people who don't know their place come to the slums trying to seize power. So he didn't even care when they started moving 4 months ago. That is, until they invaded districts 23 and 25 and piled up around 200 corpses in a single day. Our hero remembers those armors with evil spirits and wonders if malice is connected to the abandoned mansion and the armors. Khan continues explaining that 3 people share the rights over the slums. A lone shark they call the Golden Pig named Simon, an unknown assassin. No one's ever seen the face of the guardian of the coffin, and of course himself, Khan, who's at the top of it all. Leon thinks that maybe it's just because he met him first, but he can't imagine what the others are like just from the nicknames. He goes on to say that districts 23 and 25 were Simon's territory, but with around 200 deaths and all the money he lent out, he's furious about the losses. So in the end, to neutralize them, he hired mercenaries from rank D up to B, but all of them were wiped out. That leaves our hero in shock. Agitated, he asks who the hell those guys are, and Khan says he doesn't know. Leon thinks they must be powerful to massacre so many mercenaries. They should be a force the Empire keeps an eye on because this crosses the line in an outrageous way. And that if he takes Khan's story into account, the large number of phantom armors in that mansion makes sense. Khan says that everyone who tried to find out is dead, except for himself. He says the damn pig is so scared he does nothing, and the coffin keeper must be just watching, along with his own goons avoiding a serious war. He adds that he's sure they would complain if he hadn't gone with them himself, and that he understands, but Leon asks if the situation basically became one of non-aggression, and Khan says it's extremely frustrating but true. He says that's why he called him the adventurer who only seeks fame, and that after the test he was certain he has a tendency to run toward danger instead of away from it, and with that courage, he was sure Leon wouldn't say no. Leon says that from what he's saying, it sounds like he wants him to act like a hired assassin, and yeah, to betray the guild while using him. Khan, satisfied, says he's smart, and it'd be great to have a lackey like him instead of the idiots he has, but Leon says he's sorry, he doesn't like gangs. Our hero thinks that in short, he doesn't want to lose power to those dangerous bastards and wants to use him to borrow external strength. Leon thinks malice is a much bigger problem right now, but this man could become an even greater threat someday. Our hero says alright, but asks how he intends to get the guild to act. Then the man shows him some documents. Leon picks them up to read and is surprised by what he sees. Looking a bit further, he's shocked. He thinks the document Khan showed him was full of evidence of people in the slums being sacrificed by malice. Elsid is surprised too and says it's probably hundreds, but in the worst case scenario, it could be thousands. Our hero feels a strange wave of nausea, thinking that since these people live in a lawless zone, there's no way to really know what's happening. Elsid watches our hero and calls out to him, and he asks if the man can't hand this over to the guild now, but Khan says no, that the guild's higher-ups are more hard-headed than he thinks. He says they would never believe something coming from such a suspicious source. Leon says that's why the man needs him. Khan confirms it and says he'll turn him into proof, enough to make the guild believe it's real, living, breathing proof. Our hero says that's shameless as hell, because it doesn't matter if he gives a living report or dies and becomes the proof. Either way, it serves him. Khan starts laughing uncontrollably and finally says so. He asks our hero if he's in. The young man calls Khan a shameless bastard, saying that for him it's fine whether he gives a living report or dies and becomes proof. It works either way. The boss asks if he's willing. With emphasis, slamming the table, Leon confirms. Thinking it's a shame, the boy admits it's not easy gathering info in the slums and he might still save hundreds of lives by agreeing to the request. Khan throws 2 objects onto the table, asking him to take them. When Leon asks what they are, the man replies that it's a dagger marked with his seal. Show that to anyone who tries to pick a fight with you and you'll see no one will dare attack you. except the coffin keeper, says the boss. Leon says the thing gives him the creeps and hands the weapon back, which the man doesn't like, cursing at him. The leader explains that in the bag there are magical scrolls to be used if necessary or sold if he prefers. He finishes by saying to think of those resources as an advance payment. The young man prepares to ask a question. A flashback plays in his mind about the punch he didn't receive during the fight earlier. He asks if the man intended to stop that punch from the beginning. Khan coldly analyzes the question in silence. With a smile, he says yes. Night falls over the city. Back at the inn where he's staying. In his room, Leon seems deep in thought. The gang leader is the one responsible for leaving him in that state. The young man thinks about Khan the Fang and how absurdly strong he is. He understands that he still needs to train more and get stronger. The young man asks Elsid if anything caught his attention while reading the documents, and he replies that yes, it did. However, he says he needs to conduct more detailed research first, because considering how malice operates, if something goes off track, there's a high chance of disaster. Leon checks if what the sacred sword is saying is that it needs to see things with its own eyes, and it agrees. Thinking to himself, infiltrating an area where 500 mercenaries were defeated would be the kind of mission that's much easier said than done. He tells the sword that he believes he'll need a helper, someone who won't be swayed by money and whom he can trust to protect him without hesitation. Worried, Elsid asks if he isn't setting the bar too high. The boy ignores that and adds one more thing, that it must be someone who can't tolerate malice at all. The sword says there's only one place where he can find someone like that, and the boy asks if it's the 30th building in the Prima district. Another day begins for the duo of adventurers. Standing in front of a building, Leon asks if that's the sacred church. He wonders why they would place a branch in such a poor district, and Elsid answers that the church always sends clerics to areas where marginalized individuals live. The sword explains that those blinded by money are tempted and slaves to ambition are controlled, but the clerics don't fit into any of that. They're proper and upright. Clerics follow their own faith and the teachings of the goddess, so they can't be swayed from the path. In other words, they won't fall for mere lies. Leon realizes that he has no choice. Even though he doesn't want to draw attention to himself as an inexperienced hero, he'll have to tell the truth. Even by revealing his identity, since the other person is a cleric, they won't tell anyone, as long as he asks them to keep it secret. He also notes that although everyone's clothing is shabby, their eyes are bright and carefree. They're not even trying to steal from one another, which proves they trust each other. The boy wonders if that's thanks to the sacred church branch, and what kind of person the bishop in charge must be. As he approaches the door, he knocks to call someone. A voice asks who's there, and Leon says he's an adventurer and has something to tell the bishop. A strange feeling begins to run through his body. His aura seems to shift in some way. His aura is reacting to the aura of the person on the other side of the door. Someone with pointed ears and long hair stands there. The man says he is the bishop in charge of that branch, and his name is Cesare. The two of them, surprised, wonder if the person standing before them is an elf. With hands covered in bruises, the bishop is sipping something warm. The leader of that branch smiles and says the boy must be surprised that the bishop is an elf, and Leon responds, not too quickly. The man admits it's not common to see an elf in his position, but the goddess loves all races equally, and he worships her with all his being. Now visibly startled, Leon hears that Cesare already knew of him because of his previous accomplishments. The water quality improved thanks to his efforts, and the number of people with stomach pain dropped significantly. He's sure the goddess is pleased, says the elf. Awkwardly, the boy responds that he feels honored. With a more serious tone, the bishop says, "You mentioned you had something to tell me." The boy prepares for what he came to do, and asks the other to take a look at these documents before anything else. The man takes them and begins analyzing them slowly, and his expression, which was gentle at first, now shows intense anger. Cesare says this is a problem the church must act on directly, and the response gets the boy excited. The elf points out that the source of the information, unfortunately, will be considered suspicious, and for that reason, the central parish will likely ask for someone trustworthy to investigate again. If handled that way, it will take too long to address the matter, and Leon agrees. The young man is looking for someone to investigate districts 23 and 25 with him, and asks if the bishop has anyone suitable to recommend. Apologetically, Cesare says that no one in that branch knows how to fight. The man explains that some have learned healing and support arts, but he doesn't think they would be much help on a mission like this. Feeling disheartened, the boy thinks to himself that this was his last option. With anger returning, the bishop responds that since it's unavoidable, he himself will go with the boy. The adventurer and Elsid are completely confused by that answer. Cesare insists that he can't let others handle matters related to business, and just because he's a bishop doesn't mean he can't do the hard work. Expecting some sort of reinforcement other than paladins, Leon questions if it's really okay. The expression the elf makes in response seems to be one of disappointment, and he asks if he looks like someone untrustworthy to the boy. Looking at all those battle scars, the boy starts to think about something. The bishop stretches out his arm and appears to be activating some kind of power. He begins to channel a red aura into his hand. The elf uses his fire aura, a type of aura that has reached the limit of its density, leaking out and burning the surrounding atmosphere. A technique that apparently can tear mithril to pieces as if it were paper. Elsid says that seeing how quickly he manifested it, he must have mastered the ability through many battles and is probably on the same level as Khan. Our hero thinks there's a reason he's called Bishop, and Cesare asks what he thinks, adding that he won't slow him down. Leon, awkward, says he actually thinks the one who might slow someone down is himself, and the bishop, smiling, says please don't compliment him too much. He says he was a member of the Iron Chain Holy Knights 50 years ago, but now he's nothing more than a retired soldier. Leon thinks about that name, Iron Chain Holy Knights and wonders if he was part of the strongest force on the continent. Exciting, our hero says he'll be in his care, while the elf replies that he should be the one saying that to the boy. Scissor asks for a moment and says he'll go grab his weapon, asking if he can wait for him in the front garden, so Leon agrees. He thinks that he's teaming up with someone who was part of the Iron Chain Holy Knights. It's like he has an army or something. And besides that, a weapon from his time as a knight might be a cool bow that matches the forest elf tribe. Elcid says he's naive and asks if he didn't notice the calluses Scissor had on his hands, and our hero gets confused. Then out of nowhere, a spiked iron ball slams into the ground, and Scissor, smiling, appears wielding a flail, leaving our hero and his companion a bit surprised. They stay in the garden for a bit, and Scissor decides to give a little demonstration of his weapon. Then he swings that weapon from side to side and unleashes an attack, hitting those nearby rocks head-on, shattering them into several pieces. Smiling gently, he says, "Phew, that's good. It's been a long time since I felt this. I'll never forget what it was like to crush heretic skulls with this weapon." That also surprises our hero and Elcid a bit, while Scissor continues and says, "To destroy evil and also his own sins." He adds that he's sure the goddess will also watch over their holy battle, asking what our hero thinks. Stammering, he says probably yes, while the elf says without a doubt she will. Sometime later, near the end of the afternoon, our hero is walking through those dark streets. He asks Elcid if his excellency is following them properly, and he confirms he is. Leon says he asked him to wear something more suitable for walking around the slums, since he can't go wandering into a criminal den dressed like a cleric. But he feels something strange. He can sense his presence through aura, but can't detect him with any of his other senses. Elcid explains that it's like an aura ability, a technique that erases your presence using aura. He says it's a difficult skill to use while moving, but he's very proficient at it. Suddenly, a man who looks drunk bumps into the elf. Agitated, he yells at him to watch where he's going. When another man asks where the hell he's looking, and there's no one there. Elcid says he must have a lot of experience in infiltration missions, so Leon says he's being treated like he's invisible even though he can sense him through aura. He explains that he shouldn't be able to sense him since he erased his presence with aura, but those restrictions can be bypassed depending on the attribute. And from the way he responds, being of the sun attribute, the elf is probably moon. He says he can sense the elf's presence because his attribute makes stealth less effective against him, since he has the sun attribute. Our hero thinks sun and moon, is it a coincidence or is it also fate? Sometime later, Leon says they've arrived and that this is District 23. The sword says that Gangster Dagger definitely helped, and our hero confirms it. He remembers some rough-looking men staring at them. Then he showed them the gang's dagger, and all the gang members they encountered along the way obediently stepped aside. Scissor says he can't believe they got through the slums that easily, and adds that the boy is just as amazing as he heard. He says that thanks to him, he can swiftly judge those insolent heretics who insult life without even knowing how to be grateful for the goddess of grace. Our boy and Elcid feel a bit tense around the elf. Clearing a path through the ground, Leon says that from here on it's Malice territory, and that it's dangerous to go over ground, so they'll take the sewer path that Chan told him about. They descend as the elf lights the way with his magic. They continue through the sewers together. Suddenly, the elf extinguishes the light and signals for him to stay quiet. Through a passage, they can hear someone saying that's it for today. They did meet the quota because the sacrifices started to resist. But honestly, 70 people a day is a bit excessive. Even if they keep disposing of them nonstop, it'll only end at night when the ritual is complete, and they complain that those bastards are making them clean up everything. Our hero thinks, a ritual? 70 people in one day. They've been killing that many every day for a month. As he thinks how unforgivable that is, he sees the elf drawing his weapon, saying he'll go ahead. And with a leap piercing through the floor, he appears behind the men who are talking. In an instant, his weapon is already at one of their faces. With skilled movements, the elf takes down both of them in a flash. Our hero climbs out of the hole, calling out to him while stammering a bit, and the elf explains that they were supposed to infiltrate. Another man appears ahead, wearing an intimidating mask and releasing some kind of smoke. But without giving him a chance, the elf swiftly attacks. Something seems to surprise the bishop. Then he realizes his weapon didn't hit the target. It stopped at a magical barrier. The guy laughs and says attacks don't work on that outer armor. Agitated, he asks how they dare infiltrate that place, that they must have lost their minds, and that they arrived just in time, since they were running out of sacrifices. But in the next moment, the man is split in two. Our hero finishes the guy off with a precise strike of his weapon. And as he glares at the other man, the guy stammers, asking who the hell he is, and if he has any idea who they are. At that moment, the elf appears behind the man, grabbing him by the head. Then more cultists are eliminated by the duo. The two of them look down at the bodies on the ground. Satisfied, the elf says Brother Leon has already taken care of the men, and awkwardly he replies that His Excellency shouldn't say that out loud. Our hero says those bastards were using excellent blades, and Caesar says he stole one of their weapons, which must be why he could ignore their heretical art. Discreetly, he asks Elcid if everything's okay, and he says yes, everything's going according to plan. That he placed a unique spell on his appearance, so he should look like a regular sword to others, just like the ones they're carrying. Our hero thinks the sacred sword really would stand out too much otherwise. But if someone is very knowledgeable about the church or Roderick, they might still realize that this is a sacred sword. He thinks he can't exactly call this a successful infiltration, but they've discovered the enemy's true nature, and there's no better proof than what they just heard. The elf says that's true, but it's not an infiltration if they don't succeed. Just like it can't be called an assassination if there are no witnesses. And if you kill all of them, it can be called infiltration. Elcid and our hero smile at the elf, but they're a little tense. The boy says they should search a bit more, and Caesar tells Brother Leon that he agrees. Then they open a heavy metal door and find a horrifying scene full of bodies, tools, and human bones. bones. Covering his mouth, Leon thinks it looks like a nightmare, wondering how many people were sacrificed and how much they suffered in that place. Then Elsid tells him to endure it. He adds that the boy probably isn't used to horrors like this and tells him not to take his eyes off the tragedy, because even if no one else remembers, a hero must remember. The sword says this tragedy is the true form of the enemy against which he dedicates his life. Leon asks if it's not the Demon King, and Elsid says there's no way a mere Demon King could be his enemy, and that the world isn't green enough to be saved, simply defeating a villain, and that leaves our hero in shock. Elsid says that for the poor, the disease is poverty. For the sick, the disease is the Demon King, and asks if he thinks there's any logical causality to this disaster. He questions whether one can cut poverty with a sacred sword, and whether a disease can be annihilated with it. And compared to that, the Demon King he can cut is nothing, the one who will bring a better tomorrow. That is the definition and duty of a true hero, which is why he must keep fighting to the end. No matter how miserable it is, he must not avert his gaze. Only by confronting tragedy will he be able to cut the roots of evil. Finally, our hero manages to breathe, and looking ahead with determination, he thinks that he was wondering what he was saying to himself before. But thinking he could pull himself together in seconds and front all this horror, he figures the elf has a lot of willpower. Leon calls for his excellency, and the elf says that this seems to be the real facility, that the places they passed until now were only used to dispose of bodies. And from this point onward, the enemies will number at least in the double digits, and he'll be in serious trouble if he infiltrates blindly. He remembers Khan saying he should treat that as an advance payment and do whatever he wants with it. Leon thinks he didn't want to use it if possible, but still, he takes a scroll from a pouch and opens it in front of him. Caesar asks Brother Leon what scroll that is. Meanwhile, our hero focuses with the object in his hand, when suddenly he uses a clairvoyance spell. Elsid says the magic temporarily grants sight beyond the caster's limitations, and that he even added that to his vision. At that moment, our hero begins to see through the walls and floors of that place. The scroll drops to the ground, and in the next moment, the boy seems wounded. He puts his hand on his face, while the elf rushes to him calling his name, but Leon says it's fine, it's nothing. He says he doesn't think the place is very large, maybe 24 people, and roughly explains the position of each of them, but explains that at the center of the facility there's a room he can't see, though he knows its entrance is on the east side. Leon says he wonders if that place might be the key. The elf says possibly, or it could be a trap for those who came to that conclusion. A basic tactic is to catch your enemy off guard. He says there's no trick more common than the place you expect to be the weakest actually being the strongest. He explains that it's possible the place is just a hollow shell where bodies are buried, and the real business is in District 2. Our hero gets tense at that information. Leon says he's probably right, but he only wants to move if he's absolutely sure. He says security won't get looser if they come back another time, so today is their best chance. Caesar says now that the main target has been identified, he asks if they should deal with them as quickly and quietly as possible. Nearby, two men were talking, when suddenly a chain wraps around both of them, and those two cultists are quickly eliminated. Down the corridors of the facility, another man is caught by the elf's chains. Who says that was the 12th? Excited, the elf says his body is finally warming up, and that he's reached an age where he can't be as wild as he used to be. Caesar asks if that's the wall he couldn't see through, and Leon says he wonders how to open it. Trying to hit with his shoulder, he says there's no handle, and it doesn't open when he pushes or pulls. There are some unknown inscriptions on it, and the red light coming from them almost looks like a wound. Spinning his weapon, the elf asks Brother Leon if he can step aside for a minute. That weapon charges toward the solid wall, but the weapon hits it with no effect. Our hero, shocked, thinks the weapon just bounced off. The elf doesn't look any less shocked by the scene. Leon remembers him charging at stones back when they were still at the church, and that the weapon has enough power to pulverize rocks into fine dust. He remembers himself defeating the men and wonders how an attack like that didn't even scratch that wall. Elsid says it's an irregular material. It's a door made from an extra-dimensional substance, a material based on principles that don't exist in this world. He goes on to explain that as far as he remembers, it freezes when exposed to heat and burns when exposed to cold. This door nullifies external interference. Leon thinks that's not all, since he can't see through it using the scroll's power. That means magic doesn't work on the door either. So if physical force and magic don't work, the only thing left is, suddenly, the elf begins a prayer to his god. He asks please to be granted the light of rectification in his hand. Our hero asks if that's sacred art, and Elsid says he understands now. It's a power that can't be trained like aura or researched like magic. Natural principle and the power of this world can only be realized through accumulated faith and natural good karma. The sword explains that heretical arts cannot overcome sacred arts. Saying his prayer, the elf places his hand on the wall, which instantly begins to crack. Liam cheers, saying the door is breaking, but in the next moment, everything stops. Putting in a little more effort, the bishop's hand glows again, and he resumes pushing against the door. Our hero asks if heretical arts weren't supposed to be weaker than sacred ones, and Elsid confirms that's right. He adds that if this is resisting a bishop's sacred arts, then it means the door is tougher than he thought. In other words, it wouldn't be used just for traps. He says it looks like the boy will have to deliver the final blow, so he'll help him, and our hero says, okay. As he concentrates his aura, Caesar, confused, says, Brother Leon. And with a loud shout, he charges at the door, executing a powerful strike against it. A slash of energy can be seen cutting through the door, and in the next moment, it crumbles into several pieces. Surprised, Leon asks if it disappeared, and Elsid says that means it wasn't supposed to exist in this world. Caesar is impressed and says it was a splendid attack, and that it seems he underestimated Brother Leon's capabilities. Awkwardly, the boy says that makes him feel embarrassed, and that His Excellency did all the work. The bishop says he doesn't feel anything behind that door, and it seems like they left it empty, aside from when they used it for rituals. Leon thinks that place is too dark to see, but the smell of blood is there too. The elf uses his magic and lights the area again, and what he sees shocks him, just as much as it shocks our hero. From the doorway, they can see some kind of organic mass in the darkness. Stammering, Leon asks what that is, and suddenly, losing control, he asks what the hell that is, while the elf also tries to compose himself. Inside, they see a formless mass of flesh with multiple eyes and multiple mouths. A small part of it is crawling along, making a disturbing sound. In shock and with tears in his eyes, our hero says that all of them are alive. Elcid says he understands now. They slice the flesh and extract the blood from intelligent species, processing them into chunks of meat infused with vitality essence. And based on how many are in there, their goal seems clear. It's a heretical art that summons a monster using a massive number of sacrifices as bait. Because it's known to devour an entire city with just a bite, this calamity was called Leon Suffering. Asks, called what? Then Elcid says it's the devourer of cities. He explains that it takes a great amount of time and effort to prepare, but once it starts, it can't be stopped. It's an extra-dimensional being that not even a transcendent would dare face. It will come, devour the city in one bite, and return to its dimension. Leon thinks of the free city of Blaine, and asks if it's going to become that thing's dinner. Elcid says that a ritual like this would draw attention, and still fails 99 out of 100 times, but the problem is, if it does succeed, it will be a catastrophe. Terrified, Leon asks if it's ever succeeded before, and the sword says there wouldn't be any records if it hadn't ever happened. He explains that the thing about heretical arts is that no one knows what phenomenon will occur until it's activated, and the church only develops countermeasures after the fact. Horrified, he asks what the countermeasure is for the devourer of cities, and says they can't possibly face something like that without a plan, right? Elcid seems tense and deep in thought while the boy calls out to him. He says that this facility seems to be just a place to process sacrifices for the devourer of cities, but even so, it's not enough. And that the security there is far too relaxed as well, so Leon asks if they've already gathered the necessary amount. The sword says yes, at least 90%, and that now there's nothing left to do but begin the ritual. He explains that they will start the ritual as soon as the citizens are evacuated and our boy is left in shock. Elcid says to go with a direct tactic, and the boy asks, direct? The sword says to gather all the forces in the city to conquer District 25. An art like this will require a large-scale ritual, so he's certain it'll be resolved if they crush them all beforehand. Leon says it'll be all-out war, and his companion confirms it, and that when cornered, they'll hide, clinging to their last resort. He explains that the terrifying part of heretical arts is their defensive capability. It's based on another dimension and has all non-sacred power. He adds there's one more thing, that Leon has him, the all-powerful sacred sword. He says they'll weaken their forces through total war and then immediately annihilate them. So as long as they're unaware of the sacred sword's existence, they'll fall into a checkmate from which they can't escape. Leon says that sounds better, and that if they're not idiots, they'll realize their identity has been exposed and will send an ambush. Excited by the idea, the boy says they'll have to take that gamble too. The elf turns to the boy and calls out to Brother Leon. He adds that they need to get out of there quickly, because it seems they found out they're infiltrating the place. Leon crouches to pick up a piece of that thing and says right then, and thinks about what it means to stay alive in a state like this as he puts it inside a pouch. The elf prepares his weapon, letting the chain of the flail stretch, and charges at that enormous creature with his flail. With a series of attacks, he starts tearing apart that monstrous being, while our hero remains steady in the middle of it all. Then the two start running to escape the place. Stizzer tells them to hurry, and our hero agrees. Several cultists appear, pointing out that the intruders are escaping, while another one mourns seeing the sacrifices they worked so hard to process being destroyed. Someone shouts to forget the chase, and now that the place has been discovered, to seal everything off. A beautiful night appears in the sky. Leon, exhausted, says it looks like they gave up chasing them, and Caesar confirms it, saying their pursuer's presence is fading. The owl says that once, when he was young, he poked a beehive, and this feeling is exactly the same. He says that back then, he just jumped into a nearby pond, but this situation is a bit more dangerous, since there's no pond to jump into. And since this place is infested with beings that can't even be compared to bees, he has a feeling that any reinforcements from the church will take a while to arrive. He then asks what Brother Leon thinks. The boy seems deep in thought. He thinks that the initial plan presented by Elcid needs someone with enough authority. He was thinking about revealing the sacred sword as a last resort, but even though he thinks His Excellency is a good person, he wanted to avoid showing it to others. He thinks that although he may have understood the idea when they fought together, if His Excellency really wants to hear his opinion, then he goes with the flow and finally says that he's thought of a great plan. Sometime later at the church, the two are at a table, drinking tea and discussing the situation. Caesar seems very thoughtful about everything. He says there are some uncertain aspects, but it's worth trying, especially since they don't really have any other ideas anyway. Liam asks if he's serious, and he replies yes. Then our hero thinks, thank God, it's really hard to explain something in a way that makes people believe you, so he's sure he would have laughed at the current strategy if he had heard it. Since the information about the devourer of cities might be highly confidential even within the church, they'll just pretend it was a deduction and avoid suspicion. Regarding a way to nullify the barrier, if he excludes the words sacred sword, the only excuse left would be to invent that solar aura is stronger against heretical arts. Meanwhile, Caesar says that in the church, solar aura is famously something to be prioritized in recruitment. He explains that it's so rare that he's never seen anyone besides Leon who has it, but he thinks he finally knows the reason why. Leon says that it's decided then they will get the guild and the army to mobilize and lead them to the enemy base, where a small number of elites can carry out an attack. Liao says that in that case there are two requirements: mobilizing the guild and the army and forming a team that will infiltrate their base. Leon says the first part is simple, since His Excellency can speak. Liao says the problem is that they need people who can face the elites of heretical arts, and the team should be made up of at least rank A from the guild. Leon starts thinking about rank A, and suddenly, he seems to realize something. Excited, he asks what His Excellency thinks about recruiting strong people from the slums, and the man questions, "From the slums, you say?" He explains that even in the slums, there's one, or rather two, people who are rank A. He asks if the prey and the guardian of the coffin would be good additions. Caesar asks if, setting their abilities aside, they would even be willing to participate, and the boy says they won't have a choice if the elf speaks to them. Thoughtfully, he realizes something. With shining eyes, he says he understands and asks if this would be like a recruitment. Our hero says they'll give them a chance to do a great service for the church, and he's sure they'll give in once he shows them the Iron Chain's seal. Elcid says he's sure he gets stabbed if the people he's talking about heard that. Leon remembers the powerful attack from Khan and says he's definitely not doing this out of revenge for making his nose bleed. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, everyone is terrified and trembling because of something. Rise is frightened and welcomes Lord Leon, and it seems like she was about to do so for someone else too. Behind our hero, a person in armor approaches. That armored man stares directly at the guild's receptionist. Terrified, the members wonder if that man isn't the Holy Knight of the Iron Chain, and what business he could have with the guild. Leon says he's not there today for a rescue request, but for official business. Removing his helmet, the elf says his name is Caesar, that he's a bishop of the sacred church, and is there to request the guild's support in the name of the sacred Iron Chain. Out of nowhere, a loud voice can be heard from outside the guild shouting, "What?" Sometime later, in a quieter room, a man introduces himself as Bernard, the head of the Blaine division, and says that although they haven't done business before, it'll be in his care. Leo notes that the man is even bigger than Khan, and that he heard rumors that he was rank A in his prime but retired due to a leg injury. Bernard says he fully understands the gravity of the matter, since it's serious enough for a Holy Knight to request such a meeting. Our hero thinks it must be because of his experience as guild master, but the discussion was quick, until they mentioned how little time was left, which complicated things. According to the guild master, out of the current 4 rank adventurers in Blaine, only 1 can be mobilized, excluding those in the middle of missions. And they left the matter of that adventurer with the guild master, while His Excellency and Leon went to the slums to recruit Khan, the prey. Their meeting turned out to be more threatening than expected, probably because he was suspected of helping Malice, but in the end, he had no choice but to accept the recruitment. Caesar said that if he refused, he put every last one of them on the heretic list, and he could try his best to run to the ends of the continent and hide. Leon thinks he probably gave up because of the threat, and Khan realizes he fell into his own trap. He thought he could wipe out the cultists and screw over the guild. Caesar says that this recommendation doesn't apply only to him, but also to the guardian of the coffin, and if he doesn't want to suffer alone, he'd better send him a message. Confused, Khan asks if it's just him and the guardian of the coffin, and the elf says that 2 are enough for the essential forces, and for the rest, evacuating and distancing the citizens before the subjugation should be enough. Khan asks if he's planning to cut off the snake's head with a small elite group, and Caesar says he's quite clever for a mere gangster. Leon thinks that in any case, they can afford to leave Khan out of this. They all have to unite against the devourer of cities. That's better than everyone dying. Leon thinks that even though they said all that, to think that so many people had gathered in just 2 days. From a high vantage point, our hero observes all those people alongside Caesar. Rise says they sent an emergency request for all guild members ranked C or higher, and most decided to join. Bernard says there are approximately 1,500, and that's what he would truly call a total war. Our hero thinks he was able to persuade Lord Blaine thanks to the evidence he had saved. The garrison has already surrounded District 25, and the close quarters combat will be entrusted to the adventurers and mercenaries, while the other troops will assist from the rear with long-range attacks. Elcid says it was a wise decision, and that they'd only become sacrifices to the heretical arts if they charge in recklessly like usual. So rather than empowering the enemy, it's better to harass them even passively. Our hero looks at him seeming very satisfied, and thinks that either way the Ming forces them. Even though it's just one person, the Lord of Blaine sent someone to assist them. The man introduces himself as the senior knight of Count Blaine's family, Conrad, and gives his greetings to the guardian of the goddess. Caesar says he's not worthy of such a title, and may the goddess bless the knight with her protection. Liam knows he's well known for his military exploits. Khan says that as expected, he doesn't really fit in here, and our hero says, well, you are the leader of the slums after all. Suddenly someone approaches subtly from behind our hero and asks if he's late. Conrad asks who the man is, and he replies, you're asking who I am when you're the one who called me. Khan says that since they were both dragged into this mess, they should just get on with the job they were given, calling him the Coffin Keeper. But the man says he'll move however he wants, and that he's an assassin, so he doesn't really fit in with all of them. Caesar says he won't worry about the man as long as he does his job properly, however. If he tries to follow them around relying solely on stealth, he'll soon realize there's nowhere to hide from the radiance of the goddess. The assassin stares at him and says, so scary, that immediately begins to vanish into the air. Our hero thinks he can't believe he's unable to sense him, even while using his aura sense and even his vision. It all says now it looks like only one is left, and Leon says it's the adventurer hired by the guild. Suddenly, a tall woman appears saying, hi /tilde, I'm a bit late, huh. She says they didn't really explain the request to her well, so she had to prepare a lot of stuff and introduces herself as Karen. The three of them seem pretty tense around the woman, while Leon wonders what's up with this huge contrast between her and the previous one, that gangster and two more adventurers, a retired holy knight of the Iron Chain and a senior knight from Count Blaine's domain, and also an assassin. Leon thinks it's irrational to expect unity in a group like this and figures it's unavoidable since they were hired based solely on individual strength. The time has come, and our hero says they're going to begin. A massive fire explosion erupts in a corner of the district. Fireballs are launched by catapults. The district burns in flames. Some of the men scream that it's an ambush, ordering them to contact HQ immediately. But something seems to catch the attention of one of the cultists. Looking up, he sees a rain of glowing objects, and suddenly, that rain of arrows falls upon them, striking them full on. Frightened by the situation, the man shouts to release the abomination quickly. The district continues burning, completely destroyed. A massive creature appears, smashing through everything in its path. Someone yells fire, and the archers unleash their arrows on the bizarre creature. In the next moment, that thing raises its hand and slams it down hard, smashing the wall where the archers were positioned. On the ground, badly wounded, one of them says the arrows had no effect. Some men come running in, calling them weaklings, saying it's their turn now, the mercenaries, and order them to push everything to death. The elite group realizes that a stalemate is starting to form. Elsid says they handled the situation magnificently, but the abomination is a tough monster to face. He says the fight will last at least 10 minutes, and if they move according to the plan, those who realize they're at a disadvantage in a frontal assault will try to hide within their shells. The Knight of the Lord says, that's right. And out of nowhere, a tornado appears in the middle of the city, with the knight repeating exactly that. Halcid says it's not natural, no matter how much he observes it, and Leon asks if it's a heretical art. Suddenly, Scissor says it's their turn now and takes off running. Our hero tries to keep up, but realizes his companions are really fast, or maybe he's just kind of slow. Soon, they arrive in front of that tornado. Our hero arrives shortly after, panting, and the knight says, oops, we didn't take you into account. Sorry. Then, in a serious tone, he says that he will now test for himself how durable that barrier made from heretical arts really is. He uses a fire aura ability. Flames begin to coil around the tornado. Leon says it's a powerful fire, as expected of Sir Conrad. A few seconds later, the knight says the barrier is indeed very strong. Khan sarcastically tells the weakling to step aside and leave the knight to die. Charging toward the barrier, he prepares a strike and unleashes a powerful punch against that thing. But the group keeps watching, and it doesn't seem like the scene changed much at all. Then Conrad takes the opportunity to strike back and says, wow, that's amazing. Caesar says his sacred art should be able to crack the barrier, but he should conserve his energy since they don't know what's inside. Stretching his shoulder, our hero says he showed an ugly side of himself. The other companions get curious about the boy. Then he asks Elsid if he's gathered enough power, and the sword replies, of course, more than enough. It says it's overflowing with power, thanks to the bastards he destroyed earlier. And that absorbing the power of a single heretic is more effective than thousands of monsters, so he doesn't need to hold back, go all out. Leon says fine, but he shouldn't get so excited that it breaks the transformation. Then, concentrating his power, our hero prepares to attack the barrier. The elf seems to recognize something, while Khan's impressed. Leon unleashes his powerful attack with a shout. That strike shatters the barrier and the tornado together. The group, impressed, says the heretical barrier was destroyed, and now's their chance. The group finally descends through the hole. They walk through the damp corridors. Scissor lights the way in those dark hallways. The elf asks if the guardian of the coffin is there, and suddenly, he appears beside our hero, saying of course, making the boy freeze up. Leon thinks the 6 of them made it in safely, but beyond that, those 2 are wearing chainmail, yet made no sound when walking. Elsid says that means their basic movements are on a completely different level, and our hero thinks he still has a long way to go. Karen catches the group's attention and says there's an entrance leading underground just ahead. The elf finds it suspicious, and Khan agrees it could be a trap, while Conrad says even so, they can't just ignore it. Then the girl says this must be the only entrance to the underground and that they should try it, though they feel it was all a bit too easy. Scissor asks Miss Karen if she can detect any traps from up there. Leon thinks the guild master said she was a rogue, but the girl says it's difficult, that the area beyond the stairs is a completely different space from up here, so she won't be able to tell until they've gone in. Scissor says they're going in because the situation will only get worse if they waste time, and it won't improve anything. The knight agrees and says they should go now. So the elite group begins descending the stairs. Meanwhile, Leon notices he still can't sense the presence of the guardian of the coffin, and can't tell if he's following them or not. As he descends the stairs, he ends up stepping on a stair that activates some kind of magical trap. The ground vanishes beneath his feet, and he screams in surprise. Our hero tightly closes his eyes, bracing for impact, but it never comes. Then he realizes he's on solid ground, but no longer on the stairs, and wonders where he could be. Looking around, he realizes everyone's gone, and he can't sense anyone's aura. Elsid says it's a labyrinth formation, a classic technique. It distorts and expands space to enlarge the base area. The others must be scattered in different parts of the labyrinth, and with luck, he'll find them soon. Suddenly, Karen appears, calling our hero Junior, and saying they found each other right after the split. Elsid says, luck. The girl says it's a relief and asks if he would have gotten anxious being in a dark place like this, and all he can think is Junior. Leon asks the girl, calling her senior, if she ended up alone too. And she, freezing, says no, that there's a creepy guy stuck to her, and our hero thinks, creepy guy. From within the shadows, a man asks who he's calling creepy. Karen says who else there besides him is creepy, and that if he didn't like it, he should get out of her shadow, asking why he's squirming in there like some kind of freak, and the guy says he can go wherever he wants. Leon thinks it was lucky to regroup with a rogue, and to be honest, he doesn't need to worry about any of the others. He finally says that in that case, they should get moving, and Karen says she likes his confidence. Smiling, she asks if she can count on the junior, and quite confident, he says he won't let her down. As they walk down the corridors, the rogue keeps her attention on everything. The trio reaches the end of a hallway filled with doors. Karen instantly points to one and says it's that way. Our hero gets a little tense. Leon notices that she's moving faster than instinct would suggest and wonders if it's really okay to keep following her like this. Elsid says she hasn't been wrong once, so they should keep following her. Her tracking skills are superior even to forest elves. Leon asks if she's really that good, and he replies that maybe it's because of her aura and the darkness and theirs working in their favor. Suddenly, she raises her arm to make them stop. Karen tells him to wait. She senses an enemy presence. Surveying the situation, she says there are 3 of them, and there's no way around. Smiling, she asks the boy what he wants to do. Leon senses from their aura that they're much stronger than the ones from District 23, and his victory isn't guaranteed even with the sword's holy power. Determined, our hero says to eliminate them. Karen says he's pretty bold for a rank C, and asks if he knows how humiliating it would be to ask for help after saying that, and he replies she's the one who should say that. The rogue says alright, drawing her weapons. Then she says they'll compete, and our hero thinks, green aura. Suddenly, she leaps off the ground and clings to the ceiling. Our hero asks if that's also an aura ability, and Elsid confirms, adding that she's very skilled and must have gone through strict training. He says Leon will need to focus even more on footwork if he wants to keep up with her speed, and Leon says he knows that. The 3 cultists are going about their business, when suddenly one of them notices something above, and there is Karen waving at them. Then he shouts that there's an intruder. The 3 men are confused for a moment, but it's long enough for 2 of them to get hit by the rogue's weapons. Our hero thinks that was amazing and wonders how she can throw them so fast. Scratching the ground with his claws, one of them asks how she dares. Then they reveal themselves to be non-human creatures, and one of them asks if she has any idea what kind of place this is. But Karen, not changing her expression, says, what else? And adds that it's just an ownerless slum as she jumps toward them, throwing more weapons. One of the creatures says those things are worthless, but doesn't notice something approaching and wrapping around his leg. Suddenly, a rope yanks the creature to the ground, and Karen says that's what he gets for only focusing on the daggers. In the next moment, one of the creature's heads goes flying and the assassin appears, striking it with his weapon. Our hero stands there, a bit tense, thinking this is terrifying, and thanks God that they're not on the enemy's side, and starts thinking about his own opponent, when suddenly, something flies right past his face. Whatever it was cuts his cheek. Elsid says he's definitely unlucky, because that one is the strongest of the 3. That massive creature appears before him, and our hero thinks he could have said that after the battle was over. He decides to use his vision and his aura at full power, but suddenly seems to realize something and wonders what it was that the creature threw at him. Then the creature reveals a bunch of spikes on its chest. Leon trembles slightly, afraid of the monster. He thinks he's experienced this kind of attack before and remembers the rocky slimes. Then the creature, without a word, launches a barrage of spikes toward him. In response, our hero attacks and slices through all the spikes with his weapon. He charges at the monster with his sword. The creature says it's impossible that he cut through all of its spikes. With a precise strike, he hits the creature, splitting it in 2. Leon thinks he wouldn't have been able to react if not for his vision, and definitely couldn't have cut through the heretical art without the sacred sword. But Elsa corrects him, saying no, that he's able to use that power thanks to his hard work, even if it's still incomplete. Karen, excited, says, wow, you're already done, and says that even if he was a few seconds slower than her, Junior was incredible, a rank C defeating a heretic of that level. She asks if he's the type who lacks experience rather than skill, since he's a newbie. Looking at the squid skewer, he says she can think whenever she wants. Suddenly, something catches our hero's attention. He wonders what this feeling is, the blade marks left by the 2, who supposedly have nothing in common. They're very similar somehow, and looking closer at the cut segment and the depth of the wounds are extremely alike. Shocked, he wonders, could it be? Then Elsid asks if he's finally realized, and yes, what he's thinking is correct. The girl puts her weapon back into her belt, and smiling at him says, damn, looks like I can take it a bit easier thanks to him. She adds that setting that shady guy aside, she didn't think the kid would be able to keep up with her. Karen says it was a good mistake to make. Very tense, our hero asks Elsa to show him. Then he opens the girl's terminal. It reveals that Karen is the assassin guardian of the coffin, among many other high-level skills. Leon is shocked by what he sees, and the girl, in the gentlest voice in the world, says that's right, they should move on, calling him Junior. Extremely tense, Leon says yes, calling her Senior. He thinks that in the light, she's the rank adventurer Karen, but in the shadows, she's the special class assassin guardian of the coffin. One of the 3 evils of the slums and a labyrinth explorer. He concludes she's dangerous. Leon wonders if the cheerful, pretty adventurer is really one of the 3 bosses of the slums, and that no one would expect that story. It didn't seem like Khan knew, and the guild master would have said something if he did. But setting that aside, he could never deal with the consequences if he tricked his excellency. So this means he's the only one who knows Karen's true identity, and even if there are others who know, there's no way she would let him walk away in this situation. For an assassin, identity is the most important secret, to the point of silencing anyone who finds out, using whatever means necessary. Leon realizes he has to be as careful as possible, so that his expression doesn't change even slightly, because the assassin will keep watching. Then she brings him back to reality, saying there's another enemy up ahead, just around the next left. And a bizarre creature with many glowing eyes appears. That monster growls and drools. Its saliva hits the floor, which starts to smoke and corrode. Karen says it's not cute at all. it keeps her from wanting to fight it. Leon believes it's not just an aesthetic preference. Elsid says it'll be hard to land a good hit, no matter how many daggers Karen throws. And if it's a monster summoned by heretical arts, it likely has regeneration. Our hero asks if they could avoid it. The girl says yes, but it'd take another 30 minutes. And she can't guarantee there won't be more monsters like that on the other paths, so Leon says it seems like they have no choice but to fight. Our hero thinks they're trying to buy as much time as possible to activate the Devourer of Cities, and they win as soon as they manage to activate it. The boy says, in that case, Guardian of the Coffin. And from the shadows, the man replies. Then our hero asks if he can land the fatal blow on that monster. The Shadow Guardian replies, and what if I can? Then he asks that he please make his preparations while he and Karen hold it off, and since they're in this together, it would be best if he cooperated as much as possible. Karen stays silent, watching, and the assassin, after a few seconds, says he understands. Our hero thinks he's almost recovered all the stamina he spent running here. Now all that's left is to give it his best. The creature seems to sense their approach. Our hero charges forward, shouting with sword in hand. The monster roars as it prepares an attack, and it uses an ability against our hero. At that moment, he calls for Elsid, and his sacred sword begins to shine, releasing a powerful burst of luminous energy. He thinks that this ability had already been verified when he fought the armors, and one of the core traits of his sacred sword is nullifying any power from substances harmful to life. The monster roars with its eyes shut, while our hero leaps into the air and attacks it. Leon manages to slash the monster, but realizes the cut was too shallow. Then suddenly, several things rush toward Leon. Skillfully, he dodges the creature's strikes. A bit worried, he thinks he won't be able to dodge the next one, so he activates his vision. He realizes he has to at least block one attack. Coming from behind, Karen calls out to the junior and says, now, one more time. As she watches our hero, he wonders whether to trust or not to trust her. Then he decides, and while charging toward the monster, he says, let's go. The creature attacks Leon again with those tentacles, but this time, Karen's daggers appear alongside him, neutralizing the huge beast's attack while our hero keeps advancing. Leon lands a series of strikes on the monster, which roars in pain and rage. But he realizes that even after all the strikes, they were once again too shallow. He thinks he should have been faster or stronger. The monster seems enraged with the daggers stuck in its tails. But the next moment, something strange happens to the creature. It seems to be struggling to move. The monster looks back, startled, and our hero notices something's off about the monster's movement. From its shadow, something emerges, and across the monster's entire shadow, objects made of energy appear. The coffin keeper rises from the shadow, and with a simple command, he says, die, and those countless spikes emerging from the shadows pierce the creature completely. The monster lets out one final roar, then collapses to the ground defeated. Leon is in shock, thinking that this is incredible, and so this is what a rank A is capable of. Elsid says the wounds aren't healing. He concludes it must have been an attack that surpassed the monster's regenerative powers. Leon thinks it was a lethal move made to annihilate a single creature. Meanwhile, the assassin remains there, controlling his power, and our hero, impressed, thinks that was a true killing move. Someone approaches and says they did a great job as a team for such an improvised group, and asks if he doesn't think so. Then looking at the girl, he says she's right. To think she'd go for the tails with daggers, that was completely outside his expectations. Karen says it was nothing, and it's very little compared to that kill stealer. She says she didn't expect an assassin to be capable of using that technique, and it was worthy of being called the ultimate killer move. She continues and says, right, he's not called one of the kings of the slums for nothing. Pointing ahead, she asks if they can keep going, because it doesn't look like they have time to rest. Leon agrees they should continue, while thinking that the essence of this subjugation is the race against time, and everything depends on whether they arrive before the ritual starts or not. Sometime later, farther ahead, Karen spots something. She starts counting and says there are 8 heretics there. She asks if they arrived too early and says this time might be a little tricky to handle. Leon thinks that in terms of gauging strength between them and the enemy, probably no one in the team is more notable than her, and that each one of those enemies is strong enough to send shivers down the spine. However, even the ones before would have been hard to deal with if faced more than one at a time. He says now that they've reached this point, they should either wait to regroup with the others or go find them themselves. Karen says both options are problematic. Either they'll arrive too late or end up missing each other. Frustrated, she says she can't believe she has to take a gamble after coming all this way. Leon feels confused about her identity because she seems so normal. But suddenly something happens. An explosion goes off nearby. He's thrown a little forward, confused about what just happened. The ceiling seems to have cracked slightly, and he thinks it wasn't far from there. Elsid says it was a shockwave from the clash of 2 great powers. Then Leon thinks someone is fighting, and Karen seems to think the same. The heretics also hear the sound, and suddenly some of them begin to move. Leon notices that 4 of them went toward the sound, and now they have more options. Either they should go help their companions who are fighting or look for them after defeating this smaller group of enemies. Our hero seems indecisive and tense, but in the next moment he says he thinks they should find them because if the enemies win, they'll soon return, causing a huge drop in their team's strength. He adds that they need to group up as much as possible. Karen says she agrees, knowing the other 4 that don't seem easy to handle. Suddenly lying down on the ground, she says, so before that. Karen seems to be trying to hear something through the floor. Her ability reaches far enough to detect something. Then, pointing in a certain direction, she says it's that way. Leon thinks she has an inhuman level of 6th sense, figuring it's a different type of ability compared to his vision or footwork. A very loud noise comes from the corridor ahead, and something bizarre suddenly bursts through the wall, leaving our hero and his companion somewhat startled. At the end of the corridor, it looks like huge spikes are impaling someone, and now looking closer, it's holding the apparently almost lifeless body of the knight. That man coughs while hanging there defeated. Shouting Sir Conrad's name, our hero runs towards him. He realizes there's an enemy, and immediately after it there are two. A heretic suddenly appears and says he will handle that one. Our hero looks back and thinks there's one with him. And observing the girl, he sees she has two facing her. It also seems Sir Conrad defeated the ones lying on the floor. Elcid says he doesn't need to worry about her. What's important is that his enemy is strong. He explains he'll have to focus completely on the opponent before him. Then suddenly, the heretic begins conjuring power and says, "In the name of love and justice." Opening his arms, the energy from his attack spreads throughout the area. And our hero questions whether it's a blue fog as the heretic tells him to feel honored. He adds that he'll turn to dust if touched, and the fact he's using this wandering fury on someone like him means he's gifting him with a generous death. Elcid explains that he's a summoner, prompting our hero to ask, "Summoner?" He says heretics are divided into categories. There are mutants who activate heretic arts within their bodies. Then there are those who summon life forms or extra-dimensional principles known as summoners, but none of them possess any sense of sanity. Our hero draws his weapon and says, "You, generous death, you said." He adds that's his Dan line. Then he delivers an attack against the heretic, who responds by calling him a fool, claiming a physical sword can't affect an astral body. In the next moment, the attacks seem effective, cutting through that blue energy surrounding him, shocking the heretic. Leon says there are always exceptions, thinking that the sacred sword can interfere with astral forms. Shaking, the opponent says it's a lie, that not even a weapon imbued with aura could break his heretic art. Preparing to use the ability again, he says he won't forgive him. He summons a huge creature from another plane of existence, but Leon doesn't hesitate and attacks this monster as well, cornering the frightened summoner. With one strike of his sword, he hits the heretic squarely. The creature grabs Leon's sword and asks if he really thought that attack would work on him, but becomes scared when noticing his wounds aren't regenerating. Then he questions if it's an attack that nullifies heretic arts. Stammering, the guy says it can't be, that he is Thee, but is interrupted by our hero's sword before finishing. The terrified creature finally meets its end. Sheathing his weapon, Leon moves away from the man. Then looking towards the girl, he asks what he missed. And the girl looks at him while saying, "What a mess." Our hero thinks she fought two opponents, mentioning that his was probably weaker. He says that what's most important is Sir Conrad, so Kara indicates he's over there. They find a man who says he's sorry because they saw an ugly side of him, adding he doesn't think he can accompany them like this, urging them to leave him behind and move forward. Conrad says he'll be delayed a bit but will return once he recovers, but Karen says, "Sir Conrad." She asks how much time he has. The man remains silent, but soon after says, "So you already know." She says if an aura user of his level can't stop the bleeding, that's what it means. Our hero is shocked by the information. Putting his hand over the wound, he says he can last an hour, but he's not sure after that. Leon becomes tense, thinking that 1 hour might be enough, wondering if they can clear the malice from the city within that time. If so, he can be treated in time. He adds that he wouldn't even think about this if there wasn't something he could do, but now he has the holy sword. Then he calls for Elcid. He says Elcid must repeat after him so he can activate a sacred healing art and reduce the wound with accumulated power. Karen watches, surprised. Meanwhile, our hero begins to speak, "O goddess, almighty, bring relief to those devoted to justice. Do not let them tremble from the cold northern wind in the valley of death." From his hand, sacred energy emanates. Conrad is surprised by what our hero is doing. Karen, also astonished, thinks that this is at least a sacred art at the level of the bishop. In the next moment, the hole in the knight's belly is closed. Conrad says he heard it was our hero who planned this subjugation, and now he understands why and sees why the bishop trusts him, asking if he's a cardinal candidate. Elcid says he's gone from a paladin to a cardinal candidate. The knight says he's lost his composure after being put in his debt, and although he's not healed enough for battle yet, he'll soon be ready. Leon says, but Conrad interrupts him, saying he shouldn't have wanted to reveal his identity, and that he, Conrad, swears to remain silent until he's ordered otherwise in the future. Elcid comments awkwardly that the misunderstandings keep piling up. Leon thanks him sheepishly, and Karen says she'll give the man a potion before they move on. As the knight says goodbye, our hero remarks that they need to hurry. The duo continues down the corridors, staying alert. Then suddenly, the girl looks back with sparkling eyes. She corners our hero against the wall, making him somewhat shy. She asks if what Sir Conrad said is true, questioning if being a cardinal candidate at his age wouldn't be completely unprecedented. She continues, saying that with his solar-attributed aura and bishop-level sacred art, it would be expected. She adds that he's also exceptionally skilled at using aura with a weapon and questions where he learned it. Leon then says that, unfortunately, he's not a cardinal candidate. Karen asks if he's perhaps an apprentice of the Iron Chain Holy Knights and begs him to tell her, as she can't contain her curiosity. Our hero thinks he might have fallen for this if he didn't already know her identity, but says he'll tell her if they become closer. He then remarks that she has strong defenses and asks if everyone from the church is like that. Playing with her hair, she says most men tell her everything she asks. Thinking he won't fall for such an obvious trap, he says to drop the jokes and start thinking about what to do next. Specifically, whether it should just be the two of them or if they should look for the others. Karen says he doesn't need to worry about that. A bit surprised, he asks why not. Winking, she says he'll see when they get there. Then the two continue on their way together. They arrive at a corridor just in time to see a body hitting the ground. The elf stands there with his weapon, saying that Brother Leon is here, while Khan calls them brats. Our hero thinks he feels sorry for the heretics, while Caesar says he's glad to see you're both okay. Out of nowhere, the coffin guardian emerges from the wall and asks if Caesar isn't happy to see him. The bishop replies he didn't even know he was there, and the assassin says he understands. As they continue, our hero explains that Sir Conrad won't come due to his injuries but will recover. However, they can't wait. Reflecting, Caesar says there's no helping it, and it'll just be 5 of them. Khan asks if the girl shouldn't have useful tools since she's an adventurer, rudely telling her to hurry up unless she wants to die while he saves her. The girl retorts by asking why Khan doesn't just pull out whatever he's hiding, calling him a mere parasite sucking from the poor. Greatly annoyed, Khan demands she repeat what she said, but Caesar intervenes, attempting to calm things down, stating he'll explain the next part of the plan. He says he'll go ahead since he has resistance to heretical arts. Khan and Karen will stay in the middle. Pointing at Leon, he says Leon should stay at the rear as their trump card. Ironically, Khan asks if this brat adventurer is their trump card. He says it's fine, and besides that, about the coffin guardian. Our hero says he'll do his part if they leave him alone, adding that he was quite useful when they were together. Smiling with a blush, the girl says that's right, he did his part. While our hero thinks her desperation is clear as day, Colin says it might be best to leave alone someone who doesn't listen, and the elf asks if they should go now. The group continues down the dark corridors. Looking ahead, Khan remarks there's sinister energy. Suddenly, a ring of dark energy appears on the path, and the elf says it looks like a space created by heretic arts. Caesar starts invoking his sacred magic. Determined, he moves forward toward the area, saying they're going in. The rest of the group runs after him. Once inside, our hero thinks there's an annoying darkness. He can't see anything beyond aura or hear anything either. It's as if he jumped into mud, feeling like he's drowning in sticky swamp water. Feeling his way forward, his hand seems to emerge. Then he fully exits that dark area, relieved that they'd gotten out. The elf, somewhat tense, shouts, "Everyone." Looking ahead, our group appears surrounded. Leon thinks exactly that as red eyes stare at them, questioning if the enemy knew their group was coming. One of the heretics says, "Wow, I was dying just from waiting, you know." He remarks they made things difficult, but didn't think they'd take this long. Smiling, he thanks them while extending his hand. The elf tenses up, not fully understanding. As the man continues smiling, Caesar shocks that he's an evangelist. The man replies, "Oh, you found out." Leon asks the evangelist if malice has ranks too, and Elsa replies that even malice has a hierarchy. He explains that devotees merely use heretic arts passed down to them, congregants explore arts themselves and become corrupted by them, and those who spread heretic arts are treated as executives known as evangelists. In terms of holy church ranks, they're fairly high, at least equivalent to a bishop. The evangelist continues, saying it's a magnificent day, that the ritual succeeded and countless sacrificed lives finally paid off. As Caesar stares seriously, the evangelist continues, saying above all, he can show a servant of the foolish, intolerant goddess the guidance of the one true God. The group members think he's insane and wonder what's wrong with him. He's bizarre. Khan questions if the ritual really succeeded, knowing he's saying this, but nothing's happened yet. The cultists reply that they're a stupid race beyond salvation. While the leader says the plan has begun, all that's left is finalization, and they'll realize everything was in vain. Leon asks if he said the ritual succeeded, questioning if all is lost, but Elcid replies not yet. He explains the city devour ritual is like fishing. Life essence is bait, meant to lure an extra-dimensional monster. Then our hero thinks, fishing. Elcid continues, saying there's still time before that thing finds the bait and bites it. Leon says that means nobody knows when the monster will appear or bite, and the sword confirms that's exactly right. But our hero realizes there might be more than an hour left, or it could be summoned in seconds. In the end, it's a battle against time. Leon calls upon his excellency, and he begins invoking his sacred magic, asking the goddess to bathe this place with her warm light so they won't get lost in darkness. A sphere of light rises high into the air, and a strong, sacred light fills the entire place. One of the creatures is horrified by what it sees. They try to protect themselves however they can, covering their eyes while screaming. Elcid says it's a technique combining sacred arts and aura, not as effective as the sun, but at least they can restrict summoning and heretic arts. He says although using his own light would have been more effective, they can still block summoning type heretic arts with this. Karen invokes her aura and throws daggers at the enemies, but the evangelist grabs one of his minions, using him as a shield. Meanwhile, the elf attacks with his iron flail, and Khan deals with other heretics. On the other side, our hero joins the fight, but he thinks the evangelist hasn't joined the battle yet, meaning he might be protecting the ritual's core. He realizes they need to destroy the altar while the enemies still can't use their heretical arts. Without stopping his smile, the evangelist calls them fools and asks if they truly believe they could stop his enchantments with just that. Suddenly, multiple profane circles appear around our hero. Various creatures begin to cross through those portals, and in the next moment, numerous monsters emerge in front of Leon. Alarmed, our hero thinks they're all way too ugly, and Elcid explains that the invocation of heretical arts is blocked. He explains further that what he created are chimeras using incomplete heretical arts, meaning they'll self-destruct soon, but still. Our hero thinks it's more than enough to buy time, wondering if the activation of the ritual is instantaneous. Khan charges toward the enemies, calling them damned small fry. Then he delivers a powerful punch at one of the creatures, with so much force that his fist pierces through the monster. But immediately afterward, he realizes something's wrong. Looking at his arm, he sees it's been infected with something. Another nearby monster screams as it's hit by Karen's daggers. She thinks the poison didn't have any effect, and worse, it seems like they don't even feel pain. Caesar says that at this rate, it'll become a war of attrition, and the longer this drags on, the more danger they'll face. Leon agrees he's right. Our hero thinks they need to overcome this situation quickly, but still shouldn't use the full power of his sword. Elcid says it'll become a huge problem if they become aware of the hero's existence. They'll do whatever it takes to restrain him, even if it costs their lives. He adds that Leon must keep in mind this situation can only change by catching them off guard. Leon replies he knows, and all he can do now is one final attack. While the gate continues being completed during the ritual, the evangelist keeps smiling excitedly. Suddenly, the whole group feels a different energy and realizes something has changed. An enormous manifestation of evil energy emerges from the portal. Deeply moved, the evangelist says they finally arrived and that the apostle of God has answered their call. The energy emanating from the portal intensifies exponentially. Leon places his hand on his chest and feels his heart beating wildly. Where once was an altar, now stands a massive hole. The young man thinks he's experiencing fear like never before and realizes that this must be the city devourer. Leon calls out to Elcid, who says it's not yet time to use the holy sword, but they need something to buy time, so they'll use a sacred art with half power. Leon asks if it'll work with sacred arts, and his master says it'll be difficult. But he had a brilliant idea thanks to the moon Caesar created. He explains that both the sun and moon are needed to fully reproduce the goddess's symbol, and coincidentally, they have people with lunar and solar aura. And more than that, the combination between a bishop who uses composite sacred arts and a hero is truly unfortunate for Malice. With a snap of his fingers, he opens a golden terminal. He orders Leon to read what's written there. He begins reading. May the sun and moon, the two pupils of the goddess who watches over everything. May we always be grateful. Her eyes are her divine love. The 6 closed eyes are kindness. Caesar is surprised, thinking this is the first verse of the goddess's scripture, while Khan notices another sphere forming on the ceiling. In the next moment, next to the moon that appeared, a sun now emerges. Karen excitedly says it's warm. Leon continues, on the day the sun and moon rise simultaneously, all who gaze at the sky shall kneel and pray sincerely. Then that sacred energy starts spreading through the area, striking all the monsters around them. Halcid proudly says that the sanctuary is the perfect counter-magic against heretical arts. The space rejects all extra-dimensional principles and creatures. Caesar gives the command saying, now everyone. And the entire group begins tearing apart those evil creatures. Now no longer smiling, the evangelist says this is blasphemy and that they're mere cattle of the goddess. Snapping his fingers, he says they'll massacre them all. Something begins to happen with the creatures around them. Something emerges from within them, bursting through their bodies. It moves into the evangelist's hands. Then weeping, he says, anguish is me. To think I had to sacrifice the lives of precious devotees and congregants to deal with this cattle. Holding the creature's heart, he begins to crush it. He orders them to look closely, calling them fools, for this is the true grace of God. Suddenly, the evangelist begins to change his form, enveloped by that profane energy. His body starts growing stronger and horns sprout from it. Our hero and his elf friend grow apprehensive. With the transformation complete, the evangelist asks what these insects think, promising to show them the power his god gave to a mere human like him. Elcid says that the effect of the sanctuary activated at Leon's level won't last long, and if the evangelist is this strong within it, Leon won't stand a chance when the effect ends. In the next instant, Khan and Caesar run past our hero, charging at the monster. The elf strikes the creature with his weapon, and Khan unleashes a series of his powerful punches, but everything seems to hit the creature without any effect. Ironically, the monster asks if that's all they've got. Smiling again, he says it's his turn now. He then begins his attack with those grotesque limbs. The first to be hit is Khan, who seems injured by the strike. Caesar tries his best to defend himself. Leon realizes the gap in power is too large. Enemy's strength is overwhelming, and his regenerative and defensive capabilities are far beyond theirs. He wonders if the only effective attack would be the full power of the sacred sword. However, he questions whether he can kill him with a single strike. If he fails, it'll lose their only chance of stopping him. Satisfied, the evangelist claims he's overflowing with power, remarking that they really do look like insects now. Leon surveys the scene behind him. He sees Caesar defeated, lying on a pile of debris. Nearby is Khan, also defeated and badly injured, making him think, damn. He knows they must find a way to defeat him in one strike, but isn't sure if it's even possible. Karen stands up, feeling her injuries. Our hero approaches her, asking if Senior is alright. She replies probably. But setting that aside, she remarks they're in a tough situation. Not even attacks from the Coffin Guardian or her own have any effect. Something catches our hero's attention. He starts recalling the terminal showing the girl's abilities and thinks about the Coffin Guardian, specifically about the Shadow Step ability. Then he urgently asks Miss Guardian to please help him, as he needs her strength. Surprised, she asks if he thought of something good. Leon says he'll get around behind him and destroy the altar to stop the ritual, since defeating him isn't their priority. But Karen refuses, asking if he intends to get behind the enemy, sarcastically questioning if he thinks he's some mage who can teleport. Leon says they can simply leap through space itself, and she asks how he'll do that. Our hero appears quite tense from the situation. Flustered, he almost calls her Senior again, but instead calls her Coffin Guardian, promising he'll keep her secret if she'll help him this one time. The girl looks as if she's going to melt from tension. Leon continues, saying he doesn't know her circumstances, but everyone will die if they fail, him, her, and everyone else here. Suddenly, she jumps away from him. Her expression turns much more serious. Our hero feels a little scared by her reaction, but ultimately, Karen says he's right and replies, I'll help you, damn it. But, blushing, she asks how long he's known, insisting he should have told her sooner that he knew. Covering her face with her hands, she says she's going to die of embarrassment. But our hero dismisses it, joking that she would have killed him if he told her, making the girl laugh. Suddenly, a dagger appears at Leon's throat. She then says, of course, because a woman's secret is precious. Caesar lies nearby, completely battered. Khan approaches and asks, hey Bishop, how long are you going to lie there? Then finishes by calling him a weakling. This irritates the elf greatly, prompting him to say he'll kill that bastard. Meanwhile, our hero and Karen move towards the monster. She tells him this is as far as she can go. He'll have to proceed alone from here. She explains that the evangelist would definitely notice her if she tried to stay hidden, and our hero simply tells her not to die. This catches Karen slightly off guard. Scoffing and activating her coffin guardian, she says, think I'd see the day when someone from the church worried about me. Elsid explains that Shadow Step is a technique for leaping through space, difficult even for mages, so he's sure she'll only reach the exact spot necessary. Leon thinks that this alone is more than enough to get behind the enemy. A second later, our hero emerges from the shadows behind the creature. Approaching that huge hole, Leon thinks that this must be the heart of the City Devourer's ritual. Tense, our hero wonders if this is the essence of life. Elsid confirms it is, explaining it's the result of sacrificing more than 10,000 lives. Our hero draws his holy sword and furiously states that this is unforgivable. Césaire shouts in shock, calling for Brother Leon, and our hero realizes something is wrong. Without him noticing, the creature pierces him with one of its grotesque limbs. He coughs as the wound is severe. Elsid desperately shouts, Leon. Meanwhile, the monster tells him to give up, calling him a dog of the goddess. Lifting him from the ground, it says Leon has lost his last chance. It tells him he must accept his inevitable death, as this is the blessing granted by his god. Césaire yells again for Brother Leon, and Khan charges forward, calling him an idiot. But with his single movement, the monster easily pushes both companions away. The evangelist says there's no reason to get irritated, as they'll all soon end up just like Leon. The monster starts laughing and asks if he's already dead. Our hero thinks, death? Am I going to die here without stopping malice or doing anything heroic? He notices that Elsid is saying something but can't hear clearly, thinking vaguely about their promise to go together to the Titan Mountain range. But he believes he might not be able to keep that promise. As his life fades, he thinks, promise. He recalls someone saying they'll believe in his promise, because he's the kind of person who will keep any promise he makes no matter what happens. Our hero grips the tip of that grotesque limb, and with a precise movement of his weapon, he cuts himself free. The creature is surprised by this move. Leon then falls, rolling away injured. With great difficulty, our hero begins to rise. Leon thinks there's no chance of winning, yet the destiny of a hero is to always look toward victory. That's why his master, who always pushed him forward, taught him, so he decides he'll move forward anyway. Elsid watches him tensely. Leon declares he will finish the creature and save everyone as a true hero. The creature laughs, calling him cursed, but acknowledges his tenacity as he's practically dead, yet still holds his sword. Then it says if that's the case, he should try to endure this as well, and begins new attacks against our hero. Suddenly, the old hero Roderick states that it seems he has no choice. Appearing at our hero's side, he says Leon did his best, and this time he'll help him. He tells his foolish disciple to watch carefully, and Leon looks at him satisfied. With sacred energy surging from his body, Leon calls out, 7-star sword. Those stars appear, great chariot Marek, and in an instant, our hero pierces through the monster with his sword. The creature becomes confused, looking behind itself, asking when Leon had gotten there. And in the next moment, the creature's head flies from his body. The head rolls away, still asking how he dares to harm him again, questioning if Leon thinks it's over just because he cut off his head, something that can easily regenerate. But at that moment, the monster stops speaking, realizing it's not regenerating. Leon smiles and asks if it's still alive even after losing its head, calling it filthy. Or if this miserable state was its true wish. He mockingly tells it to go serve Dullahan, as they can comfortably walk around without heads. The creature becomes enraged at him. It says his irony and disrespect cannot be repaid even with his blood. Roderick says Leon lacks power due to his injury, and his body might not withstand his second attack, asking if he'll still attempt it. Our hero nods affirmatively, and Roderick says, very well, this will cost you dearly. The stars appear again, the great chariot, and this time Dovey, as our hero fiercely attacks that evil creature once more. The monster screams, questioning why, what's happening, why it's not regenerating, and why its heretical art is falling apart. The evangelist states that now that it has come to this, he will take them all down with him. Creating a huge evil vortex, he screams for them to die, for everyone to die together with him. Smiling, the boy says he knew this would happen, so he held back a bit, and now he's going to blow it into tiny pieces for real. The creature now seems genuinely frightened. Roderick says Leon must not waste even a single moment. The true essence of the 7-star sword lies in its links. He says Leon is still far too inexperienced to handle even one of them directly, but he'll manage at least one unique final move. Once again, the stars appear, and he activates the Sacred Cross skill. That attack advances against the profane creature, hitting it directly. Our hero passes through it, leaving only its shadow remains behind. That essence of life finally breaks apart. Grabbing desperately to avoid being dragged into the abyss, the monster realizes its self-destruction has failed because the essence of life was destroyed and shouts, impossible. Unable to withstand the pressure, it screams that it's being sucked in. In despair, it says it can't let things end like this. But in the next moment, the City Devourer appears behind it with its massive mouth open. And then it swallows the creature as if it were nothing. The Devourer violently hits the stone floor of the place. But immediately after, the portal closes and it vanishes. Elsid remarks that this was a close call, and our hero asks if it's over. His master replies that it seems the Devourer was satisfied with just the small snack after the essence was destroyed. Leaving our hero shocked, he says if they'd waited a few seconds more, everyone would have been sacrificed to the City Devourer as well. The companions begin recovering themselves. And just as Elsid is about to tell Leon he did a good job, Leon collapses. On his knees, he drops his weapon and starts screaming. Césaire runs toward him, calling Brother Leon, and Leon tries to speak, Your Excellency, but the elf tells him not to speak and that he'll treat him immediately. Using his sacred magic, he heals our hero's wounds. Smiling despite being seriously injured himself, Caesar says that was close. He says he's very glad it wasn't too late, but Leon tells him he should treat himself first. With a cheerful face, Karen asks her junior if they won. She mentions that something flashed when she arrived and then disappeared, wondering if it was Leon who defeated it. Khan, agitated, asks what happened with that ritual or whatever and demands that someone explain to him what occurred. Leon explains they stopped the activation of the city devourer and that the evangelist was swallowed by the monster and should be 100% dead now. Then he turns to the elf and says he's about to pass out, so he's leaving himself in Caesar's care. And in the next moment, he collapses unconscious on the ground while Karen cries out for her junior. Elcid looks from above, appearing satisfied. Seeing our hero unconscious on the floor, he thinks, "Good job, Leon." So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.